music, and lifestyle, we deliver an engaging Pan-African audience ready to connect, invest, and act. Multi-award winning, internationally recognized, digitally accessible across the globe. When Africa speaks, the world listens, and Channel Africa makes sure of it. For business, for culture, for Africa. Partner with Channel Africa because Africa's voice is the future. Africa is a story, a living, breathing, ever-evolving masterpiece. And for over 5 decades now, one voice has told it like no other. Channel Africa. More than just a broadcaster, Channel Africa is the pulse of the continent, African-led, African-run, and deeply rooted in its heritage. It's the only international station that speaks to Africa in its own voices: English, Kiswahili, Chinyanja, French, and Portuguese. The languages that unite 1 billion people. We have been there through every shift, every milestone, and every triumph. Not just reporting history, but shaping the conversations that define Africa's future. For brands, media planning, and advertisers, Channel Africa is more than just a platform. It's an opportunity. With 25 compelling shows covering current affairs, sports, business, music, and lifestyle, we deliver an engaging Pan-African audience ready to connect, invest, and act. Multi-award winning, international.
So we have a packed program for you, and we'll tell you a little bit more about what's in the show. But it's a Friday, so we'll be going all over the place. And today we're looking at issues in North Africa, aren't we?
Yes, we are. We're going to have our wrap. But before that, also after the news, we've got our Africa Roundup, looking at yesterday's stories, feeding into what could be what you need to look out for on this new day. And it's Mother's Day this weekend.
Oh, my goodness.
Our first Sunday of May.
Wow.
We'll talk about all of that and more, of course. Not Mother's Day, I just threw that in there. But let's get our news update. Here's Onel Nsinsi with your details, and then Musubudi Makura will follow with your sports headlines.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And a very good morning to our listeners. South Africa's Justice and Constitutional Development Minister, Mamoloko Kubai, says collaboration on the African continent in combating and fighting corruption is crucial. She delivered the closing speech on behalf of President Cyril Ramaphosa at the 15th Commonwealth Regional Conference for heads of anti-corruption agencies in Africa in Cape Town yesterday. Kubai says cross-border corruption often leads to more serious crimes.
Global networks of corruption exploit vulnerabilities in the international banking systems to launder money that often ends up financing other crimes, including terrorism. Effective international collaboration requires that countries have strong anti-corruption policies frameworks and that they build institutions that have integrity and capabilities.
The 2025 Southern Africa State of Press Freedom Report says attacks on journalists have significantly declined across the region, except in countries such as Malawi, Eswatini, Lesotho and Mozambique, where serious concerns remain. The 100-page report was launched in Johannesburg, South Africa yesterday in commemoration of World Press Freedom. Speaking at the event, chairperson of the Press Council of South Africa, Tamano Makadi, says more needs to be done to ensure a safe and inclusive media landscape for women across Southern Africa.
There's still quite a lot of challenges, especially with female journalists, something that we have seen particularly online where they continue to be bullied. South Africa has done, I would say, well, but there are pockets or areas where a lot still needs to be done. Respect for media practitioners, respect for journalists. It's quite important that we do that in respect of our Constitution, Section 16 of the Constitution.
More than 30 law enforcement officials were arrested across South Africa in the fourth quarter of the 2024-2025 financial year. They were arrested for cases ranging from fraud, corruption, murder, robbery, and aggravating circumstances, and defeating the end of justice. These officers were arrested in the Gauteng, Mpumalanga, and Free State provinces. This was revealed during a media briefing by the Hawks head Godfrey Libya in Pretoria yesterday.
The Hawks' efforts to investigate police officials involved in criminal activities demonstrate that the commitment to uphold the integrity of the police continues to be a priority. A total number of 33 police officials were arrested in the quarter under review. Of these arrests, 19 are traffic officials, whereas 14 are SAPS officials.
South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa is amongst the world leaders that have been sending their congratulations and well wishes to Pope Leo XIV. Ramaphosa has described the election of the Pope as a profound moment for the Catholic Church and the global community. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump says that the election of the first American Pope is a great honor for his country. The president of Pope Leo's adopted homeland, Peru, Dina Bolore, says he has brought hope to those who are most in need. Residents of Chicago, where Pope Leo was born, have reacted to his election.
I didn't think an American Pope would actually ever be elected in my lifetime, even though he probably was the best American Pope as a candidate.
I'm not going to say I'm very Catholic, but I feel like it's cool to know that, you know, somebody like a Pope lived in front of us. I feel like it's a small world, you know.
No, that's really exciting because that's not happening every day, you know.
For any news stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us +27 11 714 4459. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News, recognized, digitally accessible across the globe. When Africa speaks, the world listens, and Channel Africa makes sure of it.
Final in the Europa League this after Manchester United as well as Tottenham Hotspur qualifying for the final, and Los Angeles 2028 Olympic opening ceremony to be held in 2 stadiums. I'll have details of these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
Right, now it's time for one of our regular features. Every morning after the 6 o'clock news, we bring you a concise roundup of the top stories from across the continent that have played out in the past 24 hours. And this is to make sure that you're kept up to date. And we present this using our reporters, our analysts, as well as experts. And they provide a context for us to keep us informed. And we begin our Africa Roundup with this story from Zambia, where the country's president, Hakainde Hichilema, has called for integration of economies in Africa as building blocks to the full implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area. He was speaking at the inaugural African Continental Free Trade Area Digital Trade Forum, which is taking place in Lusaka.
How long are we going to talk about the value of the digital advancement? We commented about the changes in the geopolitics. Yes, we can complain about ARVs not being paid for by other taxpayers outside Africa. Yes, we can complain about development assistance shrinking. I actually think that this is a wake-up call to Africa, that we've been doing things wrongly for too many years, waiting for someone to do mundane things for us. We must do those things ourselves.
The Revenue Services Lesotho, in partnership with the South African Reserve or the Revenue Service, the Border Management Authority and the World Customs Organization, is launching an end-to-end release study between Lesotho and South Africa.
Maseru and Maputo Bridge are earmarked for an end-to-end binational release study regarding an in-depth diagnostic of border procedures. This study is preceded by a landmark agreement that enables Lesotho holders of ordinary passport a conditional 90 days visa exemption into South Africa. Several neighboring ports of entries into South Africa have been earmarked for major upgrades in order to facilitate for a much smoother border operation. Both experts and users have hailed this study as key to unlocking trade barriers between the two nations.
The United Arab Emirates and Uganda have signed 6 key agreements as Sheikh Abdullah bin Saeed Al Nahyan, the UAE's Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Affairs Minister, started his working visit to the country on Thursday. During a meeting with Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni, Sheikh Abdullah discussed bilateral relations and ways to enhance cooperation, particularly in the economic, commercial, investment and energy sectors.
A lot has been happening on the people-to-people side, on the trade side. Obviously today we are seeing a lot of potential when it comes to investment and in different sectors. Your Excellency, that's obviously happening because we are interested in Uganda, but also more importantly because you are welcoming us. Yes. So we are honored and privileged. So thank you very much, Your Excellency. Sir, there is a lot of potential in this relationship. You mentioned areas regarding transport, regarding energy and tourism. We would like to do more in our bilateral relationship.
Are you on UAE?
All right, so Bill Gates has pledged on Thursday to give away $200 billion via his charitable foundation by 2045, and he lashed out at Elon Musk, accusing the world's richest man of killing the world's poorest children through huge cuts to the U.S. foreign aid budget.
We're having funding cuts from a number of countries, including the U.S., and the number of deaths will start going up for the first time. They went down from around 10 million to less than 5 million, and now, it's going to be millions of more deaths because of the resources. If you zoom out, though, and look at the next 20 years, and the fact that I think governments will come back to caring about children surviving, and that we have a pipeline of innovation, and that my fellow philanthropists, I think, will be giving more to these causes.
And finally, in the bustling streets of Somalia's Mogadishu, Adam Abdullah Ali has made it his mission to take care of the city's stray cats and dogs. Vita Chan tells us more.
Ali buys meat from the local markets each day to feed what he claims to be more than 100 stray animals.
What inspired me to love animals was one very sick animal I found. As I was struggling to treat it, I came across many others in worse condition. Since I am human, a Muslim with compassion, I believe we should be merciful to animals. Now, I feed over 100 every day, and the number keeps growing.
Ali says he spends around $5 a day to feed the animals, with his friends chipping in to ease the financial burden. Somalia's predominant Muslim population has long held cultural and religious reservations around dogs. Ali says his faith motivates him to continue, and that he would like to see the government pass laws protecting the rights of animals.
And that's how we come to the end of today's edition of the Africa Roundup. We'll have another one for you on Monday morning after the 6 o'clock news. Stay with us. Coming up, we're going to be taking a look at a couple of things. One of them, groundbreaking research into finding a cure for hepatitis, and also shortly we're going to be looking at the news that's been playing out in North Africa. Asanda is going to be doing that for us, so stay with us.
It's Channel Africa's birth for business, for culture, for Africa. Partner with Channel Africa because Africa's voice is the future. Africa is a story, a living, breathing, ever-evolving masterpiece. And for over 5 decades now, one voice has told it like no other. Channel Africa. More than just a broadcaster, Channel Africa is the pulse of the continent, African-led.
It's 6:15 Central African time, or almost that time. Let's look at some of the stories making headlines in the North Africa region. And we're joined on the line by Elysia Volkman, who is journalist and researcher based in North Africa. Elysia, always great catching up with you on our Fridays. How are you today?
I'm great, thank you. Yes, I'm good.
Awesome. Let's start with Egypt today. Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi recently meeting with Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis in Athens for bilateral discussions. And this has forged a new strategic partnership. We understand it involves the political, economic and cultural side of cooperations. In what ways?
One of the most important things under discussion was the cooperation on energy. There's been a lot of discussion and debate, across the Mediterranean about different forms of cooperation, particularly looking at green and renewable energies, particularly as we're seeing issues with climate change, making governments look at their consumption of hydrocarbons. The relationship between Egypt and Greece has long been amicable. We're talking about a relationship that goes back thousands of years. So this is building on very well-founded diplomatic relationships. Most of the exports from Egypt are actually crude oil. They do a sort of what's called an oil swap. So they send their crude oil to Greece, and sort of in return they get refined petrol. So this agreement is interesting because the discussion on energy and energy production has moved on from the traditional sort of hydrocarbon trade to looking at renewables and how that they can cooperate. And the other key strategic thing that was under discussion is, of course, what's sort of euphemistically referred to as the East Mediterranean situation, meaning the bombardment of Gaza by Israel. So there were discussions about Egypt's role, but also you have to remember Egypt is sort of sandwiched between two very unstable situations. So to the east is the situation in Gaza, and to the west is Libya, which is at the moment at peace but chronically unstable. So that was under discussion, as was the issue of migration. And Egypt is one of the North African countries that signed agreements with the EU for control of migration. And Greece has actually praised Egypt for its holding back of migrants crossing over to Egypt, because Egypt was actually one of the major departure points, or had become a departure point for migrants, particularly from, I believe, the Horn of Africa. So there was a lot on the table.
Mm. The humanitarian crisis in Gaza, was that on the table, and what emerged from those talks?
Well, it wasn't. I think it was one of these sort of discussions that's sort of more oblique. I think there's a discussion about Egypt's position in this situation, because Egypt and Israel have long had a sort of a détente, and sort of been at peace. So there's Egypt's position has always been one of not exactly sort of silent assent, but a sort of neutrality, that they're not going to sort of wade in support of the citizens of Gaza, or Palestinians in West Bank either. So with the American move to make Egypt perhaps a peace broker and a place of discussion and dialogue. I think the discussions are more about reinforcing that position rather than anything that is a direct sort of actionable point from the meeting.
What are the focus areas in terms of industry between the discussions and bilateral discussions between Greek and Egypt?
The main trade is based on oil and gas, and also cotton as well. Sort of Egypt was long a major cotton producer. That's changed, and strangely enough, they're now importing cotton from Greece. It's the total amount of trade has actually risen over the past few years from 1.4 billion to 4 billion of trade between the two countries. The bulk of that is actually exports from Egypt to Greece. So it's not a very diverse range of products that's under trade. I think one of the things that was under discussion was about diversifying trade, rather than having this sort of very narrow sort of factual swap.
All right,
economic dynamic.
Let's move to Tunisia now, where the opposition there has registered their opposition, as well as they've condemned the trial of several political figures in the case known as Conspiracy Against State Security 2. So they've reiterated the importance and the right of all these defendants to a fair trial. And the National Salvation Front, being that opposition in Tunisia, or the NSFT, is spearheading this.
Yes, they're not letting this slide. I mean, this has been a major move by the Side regime, the conviction of 37 so-called political conspirators. And it's drawn a lot of international criticism from the UN and also from the governments of France and Germany. So this has put Side's sort of regime under scrutiny again. Side lashed out sort of quite angrily, saying, that the UN and France and Germany criticising him was interference with his country's policies. But what sort of followed on from the conviction of these 37 individuals, and they're actually more political prisoners, but they're still awaiting trial, and they're sort of being cited actually with the money laundering charges. So that's a sort of a grayer area. Yeah. But what we've also seen is the arrest and detention of a very popular lawyer who is part of the defence team, a man called Ahmed Swab. Mm. And there's been appeals and campaigns for his immediate release, which the Tunisian judiciary have denied, well, tacitly, albeit. They haven't outrightly said that they're not releasing, but they have not released him. And all of this is raising a lot of doubt in the general sort of populace's mind that Side is spending far more time, settling old scores and going after people that he believes are his rivals than actually resolving the things that need to be resolved, like the economy and creating jobs and boosting industry. And there's before there was general or tacit support for Side, but now that support is waning. People are really quite discontent. I mean, when you see pro-Side demonstrations, there are just like dozens of people, although there aren't the thousands of people marching that used to go out and protest. The anti-regime protesters do tend to number rather more than the pro-Side protesters. So this is a pivotal point, and as bad as this sort of mass trial of 37 people, a lot of whom are actually in absentia. They're people who have sought exile in France or in the Gulf. This show trial was one thing, but the tin lid was going after the lawyer Ahmed Swab, who said to the judges, "You can end this. Sanity and justice can prevail." Was basically what he was saying, because none of the procedures in the court were normal. None of the defendants were allowed time to say their piece. The lawyers weren't really able to make their argument. people are just seeing this as a kangaroo court, where the decision to convict and the penalties are already decided. I mean, now this is going to the appeal court, but nobody really has any great faith that the appeal court will be any more just than the court of the first instance. And we're talking about sentences varying between 4 and 66 years.
The other issue that the NSFT had was that the trial will be held remotely. How could that pose challenges or even possible distortions to the trial?
Well, the way that the courts are functioning now, I mean, the justice system is no longer independent. Under the previous constitution, the 2014 constitution, the three powers of government, parliament, and the justice system were separate, as is the case in most democracies, as I'm sure is in South Africa. What happened in 2022 with the new constitutional referendum is Side brought the justice system under his direct control. So how the courts have been operating since then have been less about justice, and they've almost been an administrative process, meting out decisions that have been decided ahead of time. So this is fracturing any faith that was left in Tunisian justice. And it means in practical terms that the normal rights of representation and people being able to have their day in court are disallowed, and that it's just not a normal justice process that would have happened previously, or even actually under the auspices of Ben Ali, who was described as a dictator.
Okay, let's move to Libya. And human rights activists in Libya have criticized the government's move to deport over 700 migrants, and these include women and minors. They've been deported to remote desert towns in northern Niger. This started with the Nigerian-based rights organization Alarm Phone Sahara, who reported this story.
Yes, there's 783 people who've been expelled, according, I think, to Alarm Phone Sahara's reports. Actually, one person has already died. This is the second mass expulsion in recent months by Libya into Niger. Libya has rather like Tunisia adopted very racist populist rhetoric. There is a large migrant population within Libya, and that's true, but they are people they're migrant workers. They are, performing a lot of the work that Libyans don't do or don't want to do. They're not a burden on society. If anything, they're actually sort of facilitating the country working, working in construction, working in hospitality, and retail. So this sort of move to expel people is the human rights and sort of the civil rights sort of side of Libya, seeing this very much as a sort of political point scoring. There are big problems in Libya. Again, it's down to economics. There are big problems in terms of cash circulation, because people don't have faith in banks in Libya, so they're hoarding cash money in their houses. So access to cash is very difficult. So again, we're getting a population that's very discontent, that they're disgruntled, and what do the politicians do? They point the finger and say, oh, it's their fault, that's the problem. So this expulsion is a sort of a populist move to appear to be, in quotes, doing something. But the impact on Niger is really buckling under the strain, because it's not just Libya that's doing these mass expulsions. Algeria is continually expelling people into the desert region just north of Masaka. And we're getting reports that the situation in Masaka is really breaking down because there are just so many people there. And the humanitarian organisations, the NGOs there, they just don't have the capacity to support this rapidly growing community. So another 800 people being pushed into Niger in one go. This is really, it's creating too much pressure on local services and local communities, and the authorities, humanitarian support systems and the NGO support systems are really buckling under the strain. And it's, I think, unfortunately, we are looking at an emerging humanitarian crisis in Niger.
And then cooperation efforts within the region that are also going to take a strain. One can only imagine what that will be, even on an international level in terms of cooperation. Let's leave it there for today, Elysia, and then again, we want to thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you again. Have a lovely morning.
You too, and enjoy the weekend. That was Elysia Falkman, journalist and researcher based in North Africa, giving us a wrap of some of the headlines that we can look forward to or look into in terms of our North Africa region on the continent. It's 6:30 Central African time. Let's get our news headlines. Here's Onel Nzinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. A conservation charity has admitted that its rangers committed human rights abuses in the Democratic Republic of Congo. This follows an independent review into the Batok community's allegations against the African Park's rangers. The 2025 Southern African State of Press Freedom Report says attacks on journalists has significantly declined across the region, except in countries such as Malawi, Eswatini, Lesotho and Mozambique, where serious concerns remain. And this morning, the Pope will celebrate Mass at the Sistine Chapel. On Monday, he is scheduled to meet members of the media. Channel Africa News, I am Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Right, it's time to find out what's been happening in the sports. And I've got to tell you, Musibudi Makura, I am a Manchester United fan, so I am elated. However, I was a bit nervous when we went 1-0 down, but it did finish quite well. Here is Musibudi Makura with today's sport.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you so much, Peter. Very good morning from the Sports Desk, and we'll start with that story. So Manchester United are in the final of the Europa League final. There's following a 4-1 win over Athletic Club. That's also completing a 7-1 aggregate victory on the night. The result setting up an all-English final in Bilbao on the 21st of May, following Tottenham Hotspur's win over Bobo Glimt in the other semi-final, also played last night. A difficult season for both Premier League clubs will end with one of them securing a Champions League spot next season. United manager Ruben Amorim is already thinking ahead of the final.
It's the least we can do for these fans, for all the support that they gave us in this tough season. But I'm stressed already because of the final. Because if you don't win it, in the end it's nothing. So we are happy to be there. Let's see it.
Meanwhile, Tottenham Hotspur will have a chance to end their 17-year trophy drought when they face off with Manchester United in this upcoming Europa League final on the 21st of May, following a win over Bobo Glimt and securing a 5-1 aggregate victory following a 2-0 win in Norway last night. The coach of Tottenham Hotspur, Ange Postecoglou, already as well thinking of the final.
Couldn't be proud of the lads. We knew it was a difficult place to come. Well aware of kind of the record they have here and the pitch and all those kind of things. Again, I think the lads handled it really well. Fully deserved on both legs to get through, and excited we're in the final.
Onto this now, Los Angeles will become the first city to incorporate 2 stadiums into the Olympic opening ceremony when it hosts the Games in 2028. Now, both the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum as well as the SoFi Stadium will host the event on the 14th of July in 2028, with organizers having confirmed this on Thursday. The Coliseum, which was used at the 1932 and 1984 Olympic Games, will also host the closing ceremony on the 30th of July and also become the first venue to host events across 3 games. The SoFi Stadium, home to the NFL sides, the Los Angeles Rams as well as the Los Angeles Chargers, will host the Paralympics opening ceremony on the 15th of August, with the event closing at the Coliseum on the 27th of August. Now, details of the opening ceremony, including just how those 2 stadiums will be used, are yet to be confirmed. The Coliseum, which is home to the Collegiate American football side, the USC Trojans, will host the track as well as field events during the first week at the Olympics, while the SoFi Stadium is set to host the swimming competitions in week 2 of the competition. On to tennis news now. Defending champion Iga Swiatek cruised through to the Italian Open third round with a crushing straight set victory over Italian wildcard Elisabetta Corriretto. Now, Swiatek won 28 of the 35 service points and did not face a break point as she wrapped up a 6-love, 6-1 victory in just 52 minutes. The Polish tennis star and world number 2 is seeking a 4th title in 5 years in Rome, with 18 of her past 19 matches at the tournament being straight sets win, with the exception being when she retired from her 2023 quarterfinal match with Elena Rybakina. Now, Swiatek will play Danielle Collins in the last 32 after the American beat Elena Gabriela Rus of Romania 6-3 and 6-3. The 23-year-old, who will also bid for a 5th title in 6 years at the French Open later on this month, has reached at least the quarterfinals of her previous 8 tournaments, but is yet to win a trophy this season. Meanwhile, Japan's Naomi Osaka continued her fine-tune of form on clay with a 2-6, 7-5, 6-1 win over Swiss lucky loser Viktorija Golubic. The 27-year-old has traditionally struggled on clay, failing to make it past the French Open third round previously, but has now won 7 successive matches on the surface. A victory at last week's Al Open 35 de Saint Malo was her first clay court title and her first WTA title on any surface since becoming a mother in July of 2023. And finally, in boxing news, the 2-time world heavyweight boxing champion Anthony Joshua has confirmed plans to return to the ring in December following a period of recovery after undergoing an elbow surgery later on this month. So he has been out of action since suffering a devastating 5th round knockout against Daniel Dubois at Wembley Stadium in September of last year. And speaking to the media in Mexico, Joshua revealed that he was prioritizing physical rehabilitation before resuming full training later on this year. The procedure is expected to keep him out of the gym for at least 8 weeks, pushing his return to the final month of 2025 and also extending his layoff over a year. Joshua's promoter Eddie Hearn also remains hopeful that a fight with Fury can still be agreed on in future, though Joshua has also hinted at other potential opponents. The British star acknowledged the need to elevate his performance if he is to reclaim the world championship status. It's 6:37 a.m. Central African time. That's a wrap of your sports news this hour. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Mosibu D. Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Are you fluent in French, Chinyanja, Portuguese, and Kiswahili? Are you passionate run and deeply rooted in its heritage? It's the only international station that speaks to Africa in its own voices. English, Kiswahili, Chinyanja, French, and Portuguese. The languages that unite 1 billion people. We have been there through every shift, every milestone, and every triumph. Not just reporting history, but shaping the conversations that define Africa's...
Or is to spend millions of dollars on storage platforms. That's what we're talking about on our business update. But let's find out more, because I don't have the details. But guess who does? Chanduko Lugege. Good morning to you.
Business future. For brands, media planning, and advertisers, Channel Africa is more than just a platform. It's an opportunity.
And good morning. Morocco plans to spend $760 million on storage platforms across the country to stockpile necessities in immediate response to potential disasters. The stockpiles were ordered by King Mohammed VI in the wake of the devastating earthquake that hit the High Atlas Mountains in September 2023, killing more than 2,900 people and destroying homes and vital infrastructure. Morocco has faced recurrent flash floods, wildfires, cold snaps and droughts in recent years. Nigeria has repaid $3.4 billion in emergency funding it received from the International Monetary Fund, IMF, to help the country cope with the impact of the coronavirus pandemic 5 years ago. In April 2020, the IMF provided the financing to help Africa's largest oil exporter cope with a collapse in crude prices, which hit its finances and tipped the economy into recession. The most recent data from the Debt Management Office shows that Nigeria last year spent $4.66 billion to service its foreign debt, of which $1.63 billion was to the IMF. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has announced major reforms to the country's visa system. These include the implementation of recommendations from the Work Visa Review, a new electronic travel authorization system, and a points-based system aimed at attracting skilled professionals and investors. Ramaphosa was speaking at the launch of the second phase of Operation Vulindlela, a joint initiative of the Presidency and National Treasury to accelerate the implementation of structural reforms and support economic recovery. Michael Mbewe reports.
On the visa system, we will ensure that the recommendations of the Work Visa Review are fully implemented and introduce an electronic travel authorization system to support growth in tourism, but also to support growth in those who want to come and invest in our country.
Chief Executive Officer at Smartfill Nivo Hadaz says spaza shops in townships play a vital role and make up a significant portion of the informal trade network that accounts for 70% of staple food sales in Southern Africa. However, they face serious food safety issues stemming from poor handling practices, inadequate storage, sanitation concerns and lax regulations. Smartfill is a Cape Town-based pioneering plastic-free grocery store. Neville comments.
So what it does is it bridges the requirement of consumers to have food that is affordable, to be able to buy in smaller quantities. Most of the quantities of food we sell will be in sizes which are smaller than all the smallest packets available from the recognized kind of manufacturers we work with, and that allows consumers to buy just the rice for the day or the maize for the day and keep it safe.
Somalia has signed an oil deal with Turkey. The hydrocarbon exploration and production agreement was signed against the backdrop of escalating tensions between Somalia and Ethiopia over the controversial maritime deal between Ethiopia and Somaliland. The deal signals a significant leap by Turkey's ambitions in the Horn of Africa. Let's have a look at financial indicators this morning. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 608. Botswana 13 pula 46. Kenya, the dollar is at 128 shilling 345. Zambia 26 kwacha 75. BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is at 5 real 70. Russia 81 rubles 83. India 85 rupee 35. China 71 23. South Africa $1 is at 18 rand 20. $1 is at 75 pence to the British pound, 88 to the euro. Commodities, gold is at $3,307. Platinum at $978 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is $63 a barrel. That is all for now. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chanduko Ligenge.
With 25 compelling shows covering current affairs, sports, business, music, and lifestyle, we deliver an engaging Pan-African audience ready to connect, invest, and act. Multi-award winning, internationally recognized.
It's time for our G20 fact of the morning, and the timing of South Africa's presidency is especially significant as Africa's role within the G20 is rapidly expanding. For the first time, an African nation will hold the presidency, marking a significant milestone. Additionally, the formal addition of the African Union as a permanent member of the G20 is a development that has the potential to carry substantial weight for the continent. And that is our G20 fact for today.
G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa, championing Africa through solidarity, equality, and sustainability. Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine, weekdays 6 till 9 Central African Time on Channel Africa.
And as you know, Peter and Asanda are not alone on Rise and Shine. Let's thank the team in this moment. Technical production, thanks to Katu Madaba. On social media is Talent Butelezi. On production is Joey Lekhodi and Pumuzo Ramakadza. On news is Onele Nzinzi. Sports, brought to you by Musibudi Makura, and our economics or business news is brought to you by Chanduko Ligege. Our time now being 45 minutes past 6 Central African. And do remember, you can find us on social media as well. Our handles across the platforms are at Channel Africa 1. I think you'll find us everywhere. Let's get to this next story now. South Africa's Minister of Social Development, Sisisi Tulashe, has urged government officials to honor their commitments and uphold accountability. Speaking at the ongoing National Development Agency NDA program in Johannesburg, the minister stressed the importance of clear and consistent communication with the public about the agency's mandate and role in advancing social development. Channel Africa business reporter Innocent Simosa has more.
In a renewed push to revive the mission of the National Development Agency, key government officials, stakeholders and leaders gathered to reflect on the agency's role, which has remained largely dormant for nearly a decade. But why was the NDA established in the first place? South Africa's Minister of Social Development, Sisisi Tulashe, addressed the question, highlighting the agency's original mandate and its importance in driving community development.
Chair, the NDA's work is directly aligned with the second pillar of the current government's priorities, which is reducing poverty and addressing the high cost of living. In January this year, I visited some of the projects that the NDA funds in the Western Cape. I know, and because I saw with my eyes what is being done by the young man who was talking to us here today.
The minister also urged government officials to honor their commitments and engage openly with South Africans about the agency's goal and responsibilities.
Gone are the days where government money is being put, and when you go back to go and see Mama Mtsweni, you don't find anything. And this time around, what has been said here and the testimony that has been given today, we are part of those that say, indeed, it is happening.
She went on to praise the women of South Africa, commending them for stepping up and offering solutions in the face of social challenges.
All this that I've heard and experienced reminds me about women of 1954, under the banner of the Federation of South African Women, who met at that time and drafted the Women's Charter. And already, women stood together because they carried the brunt of all ills in the society, including hunger, which is the case today.
As efforts to revive the National Development Agency gain momentum, the call is clear. Government must lead with integrity, and citizens, especially women, continue to be at the heart of driving change. For Channel Africa News, I am Innocent Samosa in Johannesburg.
Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
An investigation by South Africa's non-profit organization Open Secrets has found that telecoms company MTN has played a role in shutting down the internet during elections and wars in Sudan, Cameroon, Iran, Afghanistan and Uganda, thus enabling governments to silence the opposition.
Interestingly, this isn't just unique to MTN. I think the report also looks at Vodacom DRC as being a proponent of one of these violations, particularly in shutting down the internet during the elections in 2018 and 2019. Autocratic regimes are able to utilize the licenses that they have with these telecom companies, basically to, suppress political dissent. And the result is that many people are left without connectivity. And not only does this affect people's ability to communicate with their loved ones and access vital emergency services, but also at a very basic level of access to information.
The Open Secrets investigator, Ndoro Nduli.
Africa in Business on Channel Africa. Weekdays from 1 to 2 p.m. Central African Time. Africa, meet Beda.
Yeah, that's me.
Beda is a music lover through and through.
I really love African music.
He's got a taste for all kinds of tunes and spends his days listening to Channel Africa. Guess what? He didn't know.
Okay.
Channel Africa wants to help Beda and all music lovers everywhere to discover even more incredible music. That is why Channel Africa is calling on all African musicians to submit their music. Musicians, remember to give us all your relevant information. Make your submissions at music@channelafrica.co.za. Submissions are your chance to be heard on radio, but sadly, they do not guarantee that you'll be playlisted. All submissions will be carefully reviewed to see if they meet our station's requirement. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Time now for an exciting story of achievement. A South African student is making waves with a major healthcare breakthrough. Nondomiso Nkosi, who's a postgraduate student at Sefako Makgatho Health Sciences University in South Africa, has developed a pioneering diagnostic assay. Now, an assay is a laboratory test that detects diseases like hepatitis B quickly and accurately. Now, her innovation aims to make early hepatitis B diagnosis more affordable and accessible, especially in disadvantaged communities. And with only 5% of Africa's hepatitis B cases diagnosed, and that's according to the World Health Organization, Nkosi's work could be a game changer. She joins us now to share a little bit more about her innovation and its potential impact. Nondomiso, thanks so much indeed for joining us. Congratulations on this groundbreaking work. Well done.
Thank you very much. And I am more honored to have been invited today to share more about the innovation itself.
No, we're very, very excited. So, first of all, just to help our listeners a little bit, could you briefly tell us what hepatitis B is and why it's such a serious concern for our continent?
Okay, so hepatitis B is an acute and a chronic liver infection caused by the hepatitis B virus. And why is it important for our population? So similarly to HIV, hepatitis B is also a global health concern and is known as the 7th leading cause of death globally, surpassing malaria, HIV, and TB. So this is quite a concern. Even though it's not much openly discussed out there, but we are quite struggling in Africa with hepatitis B.
Right, so now you've developed this diagnostic assay for hepatitis B. Tell us a little bit, in simple terms, for people like me who are not scientists, how your test works and how it improves on the existing diagnostic methods.
Okay, so with the currently available diagnostic methods, they fall short in that they are not able to cover the whole population of HPV infected individuals. And this is due to the sensitivity of the assay. So basically, a patient might come in showing or having clinical presentations of liver infection. But with the current assay, some of them, it's not able to pick them up because they actually have mutations that deem the virus indetectable with the current available assay. So what our diagnostic assay does is that it focuses on a different region that is quite conserved from each HPV strain to another. So making diagnosis quite easy. And more importantly, it's a rapid point of care diagnostic assay, meaning that it will be able to even reach communities which have previously been deemed inaccessible for diagnosis in their population. So making diagnosis easily affordable and also ensuring that we actually meet up with the WHO strategy of reducing new infections by 90% and also death by 65%, because we are quite behind as an African nation when looking at that goal. So basically the diagnostic assay will make sure that we are inclusive and we are able to cater to our community in Africa as well.
I'm curious about what led you to look at another area or another region, as you were describing, that's a little bit more conserved. What gave you that idea?
I'm a student, so I'm doing a hepatitis B studies. So we have had quite a number of studies in our department, the Department of Virology in SMU. So this is an issue that was studied previously from about 2028, where we have seen that this diagnostic assay is not quite performing well when it comes to even being inclusive with this population. So leading to where I am, we actually tried to look at what's other available diagnostic assays in other parts of the world, which led to a collaboration with the University of Nagoya in Japan, where they had a newly developed diagnostic assay. So we thought maybe let's test with theirs and see how well it will perform in our own population. But the results were not quite the case. It didn't do well. So it led us to that we need a diagnostic assay for our population, developed for our population, so that we can diagnose our own population and they can have a healthy, long life as well.
And one of the things that has been a point of emphasis for you has been affordability and accessibility. Why is that important to you?
It's important looking at the fact that about 75% of our diagnostic assays are manufactured outside of Africa, and 90% of the market of these imported diagnostic assays is from outside into Africa. Also realizing that we are quite a developing world, right? So it's important that we also have our own diagnostic assays developed right here to service our populations. As we have seen with COVID-19 pandemic, it showed us a real gap in the health world that needed to be tapped into. So for me, affordability and being able to access these communities was very important when looking at what I want to achieve with this diagnostic assay.
Well, you've already gained a significant recognition for your work. How does it feel to be acknowledged at such a high level so early in your career?
It's been quite overwhelming as well as nice, because through this journey I have now met up with different people who are also within the stream of health sciences and trying to make a change in Africa, or in the world rather. So it's been quite an exciting journey. I have learned a lot, especially being an individual who was science-based and focused, and now having to shift and also learn about business. It's been quite an overwhelming and exciting journey at the same time.
So what are the next steps? I mean, how do we go from your assay from the lab into widespread clinical use?
So we're looking, once the development has been done and also the diagnostic assay being registered with SAPRA, that will start having distribution partnership with healthcare providers in order to get this diagnostic assay out there in the market and being used for the betterment of our population.
Wow. Finally, perhaps what message would you like to send to healthcare leaders and policymakers about supporting homegrown innovations like yours to fight against diseases like hepatitis B?
What I would like to say is, this is a very important question. We are really doing well here in Africa, here in South Africa. We have scientists who are doing very excellent work, nice work. Let's try and have that partnership where we try and invest in our own scientists, and also open up a channel of communication where we can use that to better serve our population and influence our policies making, because it's quite important that we understand what's happening in our own region in order to have better policies that better serve our people and influence in the right way.
Nondomiso, congratulations. We're so excited and proud of you. Well done on your work, and we wish you the best on the rest of your journey.
Thank you very much, and I was honored to have been invited today. Thank you.
Thank you. That's Nondomiso Nkosi, a South African postgraduate student that you're going to hear a lot more about. Wow, very exciting.
Very exciting. We also do have the first American Pope being elected.
Oh, yeah.
We spoke about it in such detail yesterday. We have to just throw in that update. Don't know if we'll be talking about it later in the show, but Pope Leo the 14th has joined the Cardinal.
Yeah, and do you know what? I'm happy for him. He looks like a nice guy. He looked quite tearful when he made his first appearance. I was watching it yesterday.
Yeah.
And it's a nice moment. I mean, it really is a nice moment.
Let's say good morning to Onel Nzinzi for our news update, and then Musibuti Makura will follow with sports headlines.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. A conservation charity has admitted that its rangers committed human rights abuses in the Democratic Republic of Congo. This follows an independent review into the Bata community's allegations against the African Park Rangers. Last year, a British newspaper, The Mail, reported on testimony from members of the Bata community. According to the community members, the Rangers beat and raped them to stop them from accessing their ancestral forest. The 2025 Southern African State of Press Freedom Report says attacks on journalists have significantly declined across the region, except in countries such as Malawi, Eswatini, Lesotho and Mozambique, where serious concerns remain. The 100-page report was launched in Johannesburg, South Africa yesterday in commemoration of World Press Freedom Day. Speaking at the event, chairperson of the Press Council of South Africa, Chamano Makadi, says more needs to be done to ensure a safe and inclusive media landscape for women across Southern Africa.
There's still quite a lot of challenges, especially with female journalists, something that we have seen particularly online where they continue to be bullied. South Africa has done, I would say, well, but there are pockets or areas where a lot still needs to be done. Respect for media practitioners, respect for journalists. It's quite important that we do that in respect of our Constitution, Section 16 of the Constitution.
Meanwhile, the bodies of a journalist and his partner have been found in South Africa in an advanced stage of decomposition. more than 2 months after they went missing. Police said they had found human remains, but DNA tests still need to be conducted to confirm they were those of radio journalist Busiso Ndlovu and his partner Zodwa Mdluli. In a joint statement, two media groups said the police had achieved a breakthrough after arresting 5 suspects. The media group said the couple were murdered and their bodies dumped in a bush in northern Limpopo province. The UN World Food Programme and Agency for Children, UNICEF, say they expect nutrition supplies for Upper Nile State in South Sudan, which has some of the highest rates of malnutrition in the country, to run out by the end of the month. Fighting along the Nile River in South Sudan had prevented humanitarian aid from reaching more than 60,000 malnutrition children in the northeast of the country for almost a month. The Nile is a crucial transport artery in South Sudan because the impoverished country has few paved roads and a lot of challenging terrains, particularly during the rainy season when many roads become impassable. The agencies did not say which fighting had disrupted the route of their aid badges, but government forces have been fighting an ethnic Nuer militia known as the White Army in areas near the Nile since March. And lastly, this morning, the Pope will celebrate the Mass in the Sistine Chapel on Monday. He is scheduled to meet members of the media. Pope Francis' biographer Austin Ivory says this will be a crucial test for the new pontiff.
It's a moment, of course, for the Pope to thank the world's media. We've had 4,000, I believe, journalists accredited. Normally there are 500 here in the Vatican. It's a moment to tell those who are still in Rome at that time to thank them for their work. Also, just a moment we, the media, have a chance to sort of look at him and see him, as it were, up close. It'll be important for, again, the messages that he wants to give us.
For any news stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us at +27 11 714 4459. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, it will be Ruben Amorim versus Ange Postecoglou in the final of the Europa League on the 21st of May, while Iga Swiatek breezes through the Italian Open third round. Details coming up at the bottom of the hour.
Zilipendwa na I am Henry Shekif.
Baiter Mambo VP. Mwaka 2020.
Digitally accessible across the globe. When Africa speaks, the world listens, and Channel Africa makes sure of it. For business, for culture, for Africa. Partner with Channel Africa because Africa's voice is the future. Africa is a story, a living, breathing, ever-evolving masterpiece. And for over 5 decades now, one voice has told it like no other. Channel Africa. More than just a broadcaster, Channel Africa is the pulse of the continent, African-led, African-run, and deeply rooted in its heritage. It's the only international station that speaks to Africa in its own voices: English, Kiswahili, Chinyanja, French, and Portuguese. The languages that unite 1 billion people. We have been there through every shift, every milestone, and every triumph. Not just reporting history, but shaping the conversations that define Africa's future. For brands, media planning, and advertisers, Channel Africa is more than just a platform. It's an opportunity.
South Africa is participating in the 17th E-Learning Africa Conference in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, where digital education and skills development are in the spotlight. Now, leading the delegation is the Deputy Minister of Science, Technology and Innovation, Dr. Gina who also is held bilateral talks with Professor Adolf Makenda, Tanzania's Minister for Education, Science and Technology, and Zimbabwe's Minister of Higher and Tertiary Education, Innovation, Science and Technology Technology Development, Frederick Makamure. Now we now speak to Zamokwake Dlamini, who's the Deputy Director for ICT at the Department of Science, Technology and Innovation, to help unpack South Africa's role at the conference and some of the key outcomes from the ministerial engagements. Thanks so much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Hi, good morning, Peter. Good morning to your listeners as well.
Perhaps we can start with a big picture look at what's been playing out. Why is it important for South Africa to have a strong presence at this year's eLearning Africa conference?
Well, I think our participation in the eLearning Africa conference and as also the ministerial roundtable, which is a side event of the conference, not only provides an opportunity to emphasize South Africa's strategic commitment to African continent through science, technology and innovation, but then it also serves as an excellent opportunity to build strong science, technology and innovation partnerships. That's number one. Number two, to promote science and economic diplomacy. Number three, more importantly, to support Africa's development goals. So by participating in such a conference, we are able to learn from other African partners and benchmark ourselves through the national e-learning ecosystem that they have in other African countries. I think also it is also important to mention that the Department of Science, Technology and Innovation was granted an opportunity to share knowledge with participants on a session that focuses on centrality of data during the roundtable, the Ministers' Roundtable discussion. Now, out of that sharing, there are a few parties that have shown interest. The ones that you have also mentioned that we have had a bilateral engagement with other people, but there are other partners that have demonstrated interest in terms of collaborating, learn and share experiences with South Africa out of that.
Have there been any early outcomes, agreements maybe, or future collaborations that have come out of the ministerial meeting so far?
The ministerial concluded on the first day of the conference. However, as I mentioned, that we have had two bilateral meetings with Tanzania as well as Zimbabwe. I think with Zimbabwe, we already have a standing memorandum of agreement or understanding that we have on science, technology and innovation, whereby we are currently working on the implementation plan of that MOU, which has identified a few focus areas in terms of collaboration. However,
yeah, carry on.
Okay. No, get on.
I was just thinking, you mentioned implementation. The next step often with some of these things is driving actual policy changes and innovation uptake in education systems. Are we seeing that?
Yes, I think we are seeing that. Since 2000 and our first entry as a country in terms of the e-education space was through the e-education policy of 2004, which focused on the rollout of e-education infrastructure in schools, training of teachers, skilling of teachers, and so forth. But I think the advent of COVID-19 demonstrated the need for us to ramp up the efforts in terms of policy and actual implementation on the ground. You will remember, Peter, that some of our schools were actually totally shut down during that period. And that has energized us to actually be vigorous in terms of implementing things like infrastructure development, teacher training, skilling, and also looking at the other government departments that are looking at reducing the cost of data. I mean, that's one thing that can become a hindrance in terms of the rollout of e-learning.
Yeah, I was just about to say that our continent, South Africa included, we have a lot of challenges. Energy, the rural-urban divide, and even within the urban areas, there's a divide between the township and the more privileged parts of the city in terms of access to a lot of these technologies, AI, virtual reality, blockchain, you name it. How do we close that gap so that nobody gets left behind, so that everybody is able to be in this century at the same pace?
Well, Peter, you'll know that the department, one of the department's implementing agencies is the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research. Now, the CSIR conducts research on research on areas such as AI, blockchain, cybersecurity, cloud computing, and so forth. Now, these technologies that I've just mentioned are actual underlying support technologies to some of these e-learning platforms, but also underlying technology, support technology on the digital economy, just in general. There has been a number of case studies that we have embarked on as a department to actually try to have ways in which we can look at what are the practical and more cost-effective and good way of approaching introduction of ICTs in schools. One of these initiatives that we funded as a department is an initiative called the ICT for RED, which stands for ICT for Rural Education Development, which was a pilot project that was implemented in the Eastern Cape schools. It targeted 26 deep rural schools. The aim of this project was to develop a replicable framework that will enable evidence-based learning and replication on a national basis in terms of how do you introduce ICTs in rural schools, because the issue here is not just widening the introduction of ICTs, but you have to be careful on how do you introduce them, because you must not interfere with the three things, what I'll refer to as writing. Be competent. Children must be competent in writing. Children must be competent in reading with comprehension. Also, children must be competent in arithmetic. You should not interfere with that.
We've been talking about e-learning, and a lot of it really has been how learning happens. Does this era of e-learning also include what is taught?
Yes, it will include what is being taught. Because with e-learning, you are able to introduce some of the things that it makes introduction of some of the subjects easier in terms of cost. For instance, if you were to teach children in terms of the dismantling of an engine and putting it together, it might turn out to be costly to have actual engines that you teach them on. But if you've got a sort of a visual environment that children can actually explore, that helps significantly without actually children going into the actual engine. That the school has to have the actual engine or actual components at the school premises. But you can use visual environment to actually teach children. And once they have that, what you call the basics of that, then you can now take them to actual practical sites whereby they can actually fiddle with the actual machine.
All right, Zamo Kwake, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much indeed, and it sounds like quite an exciting arena of education that you're involved in at the moment. Thanks for your time.
No, thank you, Pete. Thank you for the opportunity. Bye.
All right, that's Zamo Kwake Dlamini, Deputy Director for ICT at South Africa's Department of Science and Technology and Innovation, speaking to us about the South Africa's participation at the 17th e-learning Africa Conference underway in Tanzania.
Start your day right with Channel Africa Breakfast.
That smells delicious.
With 25 compelling shows covering current affairs, sports, business, music.
And President Netumbo Nandi Ndaitwa is on her first ever foreign visit, traveling to Angola for a 2-day official visit. The visit is meant to strengthen bilateral and trade ties between the two countries. The cooperation will be in agriculture, trade, oil and gas. The visit marks the first official engagement between Nandi Ndaitwa and Angolan President João Lourenço. To talk to us more about this visit, Faustino Henriquez, African political analyst, joins us now on the line. Faustino, a very good morning to you. How are you on this Friday?
Good morning to you and good morning to all the listeners of Channel Africa. I'm okay. I'm fine.
Great. What do you make of Nandi Ndaitwa's first official foreign visit to Angola? Why do you think she starts with Angola?
Well, according to Angolan sources, this visit came by an invitation of President João Lourenço to the head state of Namibia, Netumbo Nandi Ndaitwa. So he will make a state visit starting from today in Angola by this invitation. And I think that is a very, very important sign, because Angola and Namibia share a historical relationship. Remember that in Namibia and in Angola are in power both political parties that came with the independence of each countries. So they share good relations, they share historic ties from they forefathers or the founders of MPLA and the sort Western African organization SWAPO. So this is a very, very important visit at this moment, and we hope both countries can strengthen not just the political relationship, but especially engage the private sector.
As you say, there's been a level of good cooperation between the two countries. There's more than 40 agreements and memorandums of understanding signed between Namibia and Angola. The countries also signed an agreement for the construction of the Baines hydroelectric project, which involves a dam over the Kunene River. How do you see this particular construction benefiting both countries?
This is a very, very, very important step, because as we know, Namibia is facing, sometimes Namibia is facing drought and power shortage, and Angola can share with Namibia this very, very important project, so that it can help in terms of industrialization, because it's time for African countries to make some steps in terms of industry, because of agriculture, agribusiness, and agri-industry. So this project of them can help them boost the power supply to the towns, power supply to the villages, and also power supply to the industries.
With this latest engagement, how do you think it will impact trade between the two countries in the state to make sure that there is a trade balance? Angola exported products worth $165 million and imported $55.3 million from Namibia back in 2023. How do we reach a balance between the two?
Well, I'm not an economist, so in terms of numbers, I will not go into details. But I think that there is a trade deficit between Angola and Namibia. And remember that in the last years, both countries tried also to share an agreement in terms of monetary terms, so that we could use Namibian rands here in Angola, and the Angolans could also use the Angolan kwanzas in Namibia. But this kind of agreement in the past failed, And now both countries are trying to reborn the ancient agreements so that they can use both currencies in their countries. There is a deficit between Angola and Namibia in terms of commerce, in terms of trade. And I think that it's time maybe to balance. It's time to make some agreements so that both countries can have a fair share in this kind of trade agreement. But the great problem is that we are always signing agreements. We are always signing new agreements, but the real problem is the implementation of those agreements. And I hope this time maybe Angola and Namibia can have the opportunity to revive the bilateral commission, and especially the businessmen and the entrepreneurs. This private sector must have a role to play, not just the political, the governments, the state institutions, but especially the private sector must have a role to play in all of this.
And I wonder, and guess we'll see, in terms of following her visit in Angola, the Namibian presidency, whether that shows that the direction of her presidency is to other countries that she wants to solidify ties with in that region. But for now, we'll leave it there, Faustino, and thanks again for your time.
Okay, nothing at all.
Thanks.
Okay.
Faustino Henriquez is African political expert.
Get Channel Africa on DSTV audiobook. We deliver an engaging Pan-African audience ready to connect, invest, and act. Multi-award winning, internationally recognized, digitally accessible across the globe. When Africa speaks, the world listens. And Channel Africa
Palliative Care Centres, APPC, says that it would like to dispel the myth that hospices offer substandard care for patients and that people who go to hospices go there to die. This is as Hospice Week is observed in the country from the 4th to the 10th of May. Now, this week shines a light on the support offered to those with life-limiting illnesses and their families. Sisi Sechalo has more.
The theme for this year's Hospice Week is Passion for Compassion. According to the Association of Palliative Care Centres, this week will be used to demonstrate compassion in communities and to reflect on the compassionate care that hospice workers provide for patients and their families. The association in South Africa says the work of the hospices are often undermined. Interim Chief Executive Officer of APCC is Beda.
We comply with standards that are internationally accredited. A lot of the facilities that claim to offer palliative care don't have trained staff. So we try and get the message over that our nurses have exactly the same qualifications that any other nurse will have in the private and public sector. And then they do an additional 9-month course with the University of Cape Town, qualifying them to provide palliative care.
Channel Africa caught up with patients and those providing the service to find out what they ought to be doing this week. Signy Pellman is receiving care at Greendale House Palliative and Hospice Care Centre based in Johannesburg. He says the centre has changed his perception about hospices.
Before I knew and before I came to hospice is the only place I knew is a place you go to before you go to a mortuary. And that was my envision of hospice. That's what I thought hospice is all about, going there to die. And then my daughter's friend, who's a travelling sister, she travels the world. She's in England at the moment giving talks and that. And my daughter phoned her and she says, no, hospice is not like that. And she says, get your dad booked into hospice. You've got all the papers from all the doctors, and speak to them. And this is the way my daughter got it arranged. And as I say, when they spoke to the heart, and within a day, and the following day I was registered.
Greendale House Palliative and Hospice Care Centre is the first hospice in Africa, having its footprint in many parts of the Gauteng province in South Africa. The Chief Executive Officer of the centre, Jackie Kay, says her centre has doctors, home care nurses, registered nurses, community care workers and social workers. She elaborates further on the work that they do.
We make sure that the person is comfortable. So if you've got a life-threatening illness or a life-limiting illness, we need to make sure that your pain is controlled. That's the most important thing. Many people will die purely from pain because they age, their body just ages that much rapidly. We also look after the symptoms of a person. So in other words, if they are taking pain medication, are there symptoms that happen? Is somebody actually getting more ill on those tablets, medication, and we have to change that. So we watch that very closely as well. And then we obviously look after the person from the spiritual, psychosocial point of view, because they need to be kept relaxed, calm, and mostly to celebrate their life.
Kay explains the difference between palliative and hospice care.
So palliative care means that from the time that you are diagnosed with a life-threatening illness, you can register with a hospice who will look after you, and they could look after you for 10 years. They could look after you for 2 years. Your disease, your diagnosis is not imminently terminal, meaning you can still celebrate life. You will be maybe in remission. Maybe your family just needs support, okay? When you have less than 6 months to live, that becomes hospice care. So, and hospice care will celebrate your life and take you all the way through to the end of your life, making very sure that your pain is controlled, your symptoms are managed, that psychologically that you are looked after, that everything is put in place for you, and that your family can cope with this as well.
Another hospice providing palliative, hospice and frail care is FWC Hospice, also based in Johannesburg. The centre was established in 2001 during the AIDS epidemic. It accepts people from 18 years of age on a minimal fee. The Chief Executive Officer of the hospice, Audrey Jacobs, explains further about the work that they do.
Well, anybody who's got an end-of-life situation. So someone who's got cancer, that is, or any life-threatening disease, we accept. So they would come to our center and we would look after them. We've realized, and we've had so many testimonies come back to us to say, you've actually helped us as a family, because now we know my mom's in good care, we can come visit her here, and it takes the burden off us.
For Channel Africa, I'm Sisi Sekhalo in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Right, it's 7:30, which means it's time to find out what's in our news headlines. Good morning, Onele Nsinsi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Burundi is set to hold legislative and district election next month on the 4th of June. The Burundian constitution, which was revised in 2018, now includes a change in the length of the presidential term from 5 to 7 years. A conservation charity has admitted that its rangers committed human rights abuses in the Democratic Republic of Congo. This follows an independent review into the Batok community's allegations against the African Park Rangers. And this morning, the Pope will celebrate Mass at the Sistine Chapel. On Monday, he is scheduled to meet members of the media. Channel Africa News, I am Onele Nsinsi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Let's get our sports news. Here's Musibudi Makura with your details.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning once again from the sports desk. Now, Manchester United are into the final of the Europa League following a 4-1 win over Athletic Club, completing a 7-1 aggregate victory last night. The result sets up an all-English final in Bilbao on the 21st of May following Tottenham Hotspur's win over Beda Glimt in the other semi-final also played last night. A difficult season for both Premier League clubs will end with one of them finally securing a Champions League spot next season. United manager Ruben Amorim already thinking about the final.
It's the least we can do for these fans, for all the support that they gave us in this tough season. But I'm stressed already because of the final. Because if you don't win it, in the end, it's nothing. So we are happy to be there. Let's see it.
Meanwhile, Tottenham Hotspur will have a chance to end their 17-year trophy drought when they face off with Manchester United in the Europa League final later on this month. This after securing a 5-1 aggregate victory on the night over Beda Glimt. They having won that game yesterday in the second leg by 2-0 in Norway. Let's hear from Ange Postecoglou, Spurs manager.
Couldn't be prouder of the lads. We knew it was a difficult place to come. Well aware of kind of the record they have here and the pitch and all those kind of things. Again, I think the lads handled it really well. Fully deserved on both legs to get through, and excited we're in the final.
On to tennis news now. Carlos Alcaraz said he is back to his best for the Italian Open this after suffering injuries last month, while the Spaniard also welcomed back world number one Jannik Sinner, who is poised for a comeback on home soil after serving a doping suspension. Alcaraz withdrew from the Madrid Open just last month after struggling with a hamstring as well as groin injuries he had sustained during the Barcelona Open final, opting to take a break so he could recover well before his French Open title defence. Alcaraz, who celebrated his 22nd birthday on Monday, received a bye into the second round in Rome, where he will face off with Serbia's Dusan Lajovic. Alcaraz is the third seed in Rome, and the Spaniard says he hopes to meet Sinner in the final with both players on opposite sides of the draw. The Italian has remained world number one despite serving a 3-month doping ban as the 3-time Grand Slam champion prepares for his first match since winning the Australian Open in January of this year. Meanwhile, the defending champion Iga Swiatek cruised through to the Italian Open third round with a crushing straight sets win over Italian wildcard Elisabetta Cosiretto. Now, Swiatek won 28 of 35 service points and also did not face a break point as she wrapped up a 6-love, 6-1 victory in just 52 minutes. The Polish world number 2 is seeking a 4th title in 5 years in Rome, with 18 of her past 19 matches at the tournament being straight sets victories, the exception being when she retired from the 2023 quarterfinal with Elena Rybakina. Swiatek will play Daniel Collins on the USA in the last 32 after the American beat Elena Gabriela Rus on Romania 6-3 and 6-3. The 23-year-old, who will bid for a 5th title in 6 years at the French Open later on this month, has reached at least the quarterfinals of her previous 8 tournaments but is yet to win a trophy this season. Meanwhile, Japan's Naomi Osaka continued her fine form of run on clay with a 2-6, 7-5 and 6-1 victory over Swiss lucky loser Victoria Golubic. The 27-year-old has traditionally struggled on clay, failing to make it past the French Open third round, but has now won 7 successive matches on the surface. A victory at last week's Al Open 35 de Saint Malo was her first clay court title and her first WTA title on surface since becoming a mother back in 2023. And finally, Los Angeles will become the first city to incorporate 2 stadiums into an Olympic opening ceremony when it hosts the Games in 2028. Both the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum as well as the SoFi Stadium will host the event on the 14th of July in 2028. Organizers having confirmed this on Thursday. The Coliseum, which was used at the 1932 as well as the 1984 Olympic Games, also hosts the closing ceremony on the 30th of July and also becomes the first venue venue to host events across 3 games. The SoFi Stadium, host of the NFL sides, the Los Angeles Rams, as well as the Los Angeles Chargers, will host the Paralympics opening ceremony on the 15th of August, with the event closing ceremony at the Coliseum on the 27th of August. Now, details of the opening ceremony, including just how the 2 stadiums will be utilized, are yet to be confirmed. The Coliseum is also home to the American football side, the USC Trojans, and will host the track and field events during the first week at the Olympic Games, while the SoFi Stadium will host the swimming competitions in week 2 of the Olympic Games. With that's a wrap from the sports desk. I'm back with a final sports update on Africa Rise and Shine in the next hour. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or give us a call on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Mix Vibration sur Channel Africa.
Nous allons accueillir sur ces plateaux de Mix Vibration un artiste pas comme les autres. Il est exceptionnel. Il se classe résolument dans la trajectoire des artistes qui défendent le patrimoine du folklore africain, mais aussi de la rumba. Ici, Jérémy Tchani.
En tout cas, je vous dis merci à la Channel Africa, à tout le monde qui nous suit. Dans la vie, si tu veux aller loin, il faut comprendre les temps. Il y a ceux-là qui étaient dans leur temps, mais à cause d'une mauvaise conduite, à cause des gens qui l'accompagnait, à cause de sa famille, à cause beaucoup de choses, son temps passé.
Voilà, donc il faut toujours gérer le temps. Chaque chose a son temps, dit-on, et la couronne ne dure pas éternellement, dit-on. Donc il faut toujours gérer le temps que Dieu vous a donné sur la terre. C'est le message que Jérémy Tchani nous amène aujourd'hui sur Mix Vibration à Channel Africa.
Mix Vibration, tous les dimanches de 18h à 19h, temps universel.
All right, it's time to take a look at what's happening
in the world of economics. Here's Chanduko Lugege with the details.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda and Beda. Good morning once again. Let's start in West Africa. Mali owes more than $94 million to the entity managing a dam, which also provides power to Senegal and Mauritania. The funding gap raises the spectre of more electricity supply problems in Mali, where outages in recent years have dented public support for the military government that took power following coups in 2020 and 2021. The Manatali Dam and Power Plant came online in 2002 and has an installed capacity of 200 megawatts. More than half of what it produces goes to Mali, while Senegal gets 33% and Mauritania gets 15%. Nigeria has repaid $3.4 billion in emergency funding it received from the International Monetary Fund, IMF, to help the country cope with the impact of the coronavirus pandemic 5 years ago. In April 2020, the IMF provided the financing to help Africa's largest oil exporter cope with a collapse in crude prices, which hit its finances and tipped the economy into recession. The most recent data from the Debt Management Office shows that Nigeria last year spent $4.66 billion to service its foreign debt, of which $1.63 billion was to the IMF. In North Africa, Morocco plans to spend $760 million on storage platforms across the country to stockpile necessities in immediate response to potential disasters. The stockpiles were ordered by King Mohammed VI in the wake of the devastating earthquake that hit the High Atlas Mountains in September 2023, killing more than 2,900 people and destroying homes and vital infrastructure. Morocco has faced recurrent flash floods, wildfires, cold snaps, and droughts in recent years. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has announced major reforms to the country's visa system These include the implementation of recommendations from the Work Visa Review, a new electronic travel authorization system, and a points-based system aimed at attracting skilled professionals and investors. Ramaphosa was speaking at the launch of the second phase of Operation Vulindlela, a joint initiative of the Presidency and National Treasury to accelerate the implementation of structural reforms and support economic recovery. Ramaphosa elaborates.
On the visa system, we will ensure that the recommendations of the Work Visa Review are fully implemented and introduce an electronic travel authorization system to support growth in tourism, but also to support growth in those who want to come and invest in our country.
In news further afield, U.S. President Donald Trump has announced that his administration has reached a trade deal with the U.K. Speaking at the White House, he said the agreement would provide access to the British market for American beef, agricultural and industrial products. He says there won't be any red tape, and he congratulated the British Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer.
With this deal, the UK joins the United States in affirming that reciprocity and fairness is an essential and vital principle of international trade. The deal includes billions of dollars of increased market access for American exports, especially in agriculture, dramatically increasing access for American beef, ethanol, and virtually all of the products produced by our great farmers.
Your financial indicators this morning: $1 in Nigeria is at 1,000 naira 606. In Botswana, 13 pula 46. Kenya, the dollar is at 128 shilling 345. Zambia, 26 kwacha 75. BRICS countries: $1 in Brazil is at 5 real 70. Russia, 81 rubles 83. India, 85 rupee 35. China, 71.23. South Africa, $1 is at 18 rand 20. $1 is at 75 pence to the British pound, 88 to the euro. Commodities: gold is at $3,314, platinum at $979 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil, $63.15 a barrel. That's all for now. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 117144459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chanduko Ligege.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Bringing you the energy, news, and good vibes to kickstart your day. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Now, as the week wraps up, it's time for us to take stock of some of the key movements across African and global markets. From a rebound in Bitcoin prices amid fresh global trade tensions to renewed foreign investor interest in South African equities, and central banks across Africa responding to inflation and currency pressures. And to help us unpack all of this, we're now joined by Chantal Marx, who's the head of investment research at FNB Wealth and Investments. Thanks so much indeed for joining us, Chantal. Always good to talk to you.
It's an absolute pleasure and a beautiful Friday morning.
Yes, happy Friday indeed. The sun is out. All right, so let's talk about how the sun has been shining on Bitcoin. Prices have bounced back quite a bit, even as this new wave of trade war tensions have been rattling markets. What's driving, do you think, this sudden sort of surge in cryptocurrencies or resilience in crypto?
So I think that it's very important to remember that cryptocurrencies aren't necessarily well correlated with other kind of traditional asset classes. So sometimes you will see kind of pressure coming through on global markets and then Bitcoin prices being well supported. But at the same time, sometimes when there's pressure in global markets, there'll also be pressure in Bitcoin. It doesn't seem to move exactly like everything else. What we do know is that Bitcoin does tend to trade quite closely to its technical levels. And what what we had at the end of March, beginning of April, was kind of a consolidation, that they call it, at lower levels. And from there, we saw buyers stepping in again to get involved. There could be a measure of investors looking for alternatives outside of traditional markets because of all the volatility that we're seeing and because of all the chaos, perhaps thinking that Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies will be shielded from the impact of these tariffs and policy changes that we're seeing globally.
I've always been fearful of Bitcoin, waiting for for it to crash and burn almost. But do you get a sense that Bitcoin is here to stay now?
So, I mean, I'm also quite a skeptic when it comes to Bitcoin, just because of the way that it's valued. It's not necessarily valued like a traditional asset class where you look at cash flows and expected returns going forward, and it's easily forecastable. In this way, the way that Bitcoin trades is very similar to what we would have expected gold to trade like when it just came onto the board. It has value because the market says it has value. So I'm still not 100% convinced. I know that it's uncorrelated, so it has some diversification benefit. And by that, I mean, I wouldn't own only Bitcoin, perhaps dabble a little bit in cryptocurrencies, but keep the majority of my investments and my savings in other asset classes.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one for sure. All right, let's turn to South Africa. A noticeable uptick in foreign inflows into the local stock market. What's behind this renewed interest, and is it a trend that's likely to continue?
So what we've seen over the last few months is investors moving away from the US market. And I think that a lot of professional investors were overweight the US market because it just seemed as if the growth prospects were going to continue indefinitely. And with the policy changes that we've seen there, I think a lot of investors have grown skeptical. So they're looking for opportunities elsewhere. The US market is very expensive. They're looking for cheaper assets to buy. And we've seen Europe being a beneficiary, as well as China being a beneficiary, but other emerging markets also looking interesting to investors because the valuations are compelling, and you don't have a situation where you are as uncertain on the policy front as you are in the US. And it sounds silly to say that we've got more policy certainty in South Africa than in the US, but that's the reality right now.
What else has been feeding into the local markets in South Africa?
So in the local market in South Africa, we've seen it being very well supported by gold mining in particular. So because we've had this uncertainty, the gold price has rallied really hard, and that has had a very positive impact on our gold miners. It's a fairly sizable chunk of our local market. So even when there's a lot of uncertainty and volatility and investors are leaving the stock market, they're still happy to stay invested in gold miners and South African gold miners generally. So that's really helped us look a lot better relative to the rest of the world.
All right, let's go to Malawi. Central bank there has decided to keep interest rates high to try and combat inflation. How effective are such moves in smaller African economies? And I guess there's some risk to this kind of thing, particularly when it comes to growth.
Absolutely. So very high interest rates can stymie growth. And I mean, the bank's policy rate in Malawi has been 26% since February last year. And really, they need to keep inflation in check in order to protect households. And we've also seen Malawians deeply worried about a spiraling cost of living there. So you kind of have to balance that quite carefully. The problem is what you stated in your opening. How effective is it? You need to have quite a robust financial system and very effective pass-throughs for policy rates to really work as a monetary policy tool, as a tool to combat inflation. And I think that's where the question marks come in. In South Africa, when you see an adjustment to interest rates, the impact on households is almost immediate. While I think in a country like Malawi and similar-sized countries, it becomes a little bit more challenging.
Okay, let's go to West Africa now. Nigeria's Naira continues to depreciate, and I suppose partly predictable given that oil dropped below $60 a barrel, and we know that Nigeria's economy pretty much lives on oil. I guess this poses serious risks for Nigeria's economy right now.
Yes, so Nigeria is very dependent on oil exports, and if the oil price comes under pressure, their export basket shrinks and their currency comes under pressure. And I think the biggest issue from a currency perspective would be the fiscal situation in Nigeria. So a lot of their debt will be dollar denominated or hard currency denominated, and when you translate that back into naira, it suddenly gets extremely expensive. So I think that's where the biggest worry will lie now, the budget of the country as a whole, and how they finance themselves.
What do you know about the Nigerian Stock Exchange? We hardly ever talk about it, but a country that's first, second biggest economy on the continent, depending on what you're measuring. Is there value in that stock exchange?
So I think that the challenge with the Nigerian Stock Exchange and several other exchanges across the continent is that liquidity is not great. So it's very difficult to buy and sell efficiently. You'll often see that the prices will swing by quite a margin. But I mean, we know a company very well that's listed on the Nigerian Stock Exchange, and that's MTN Nigeria. So MTN Nigeria is listed on the Nigerian Stock Exchange. It's a fairly sizable chunk of that stock exchange, and that business has been doing remarkably well. Of course, we can get exposure to that in Johannesburg as well through the MTN group that owns a big chunk of it, but that stock has been doing very well, and the company generally has been very strong.
All right, East Africa now. Kenya's economy grew by 5.1% in the last quarter. What sectors are driving this performance, and could Kenya be emerging as a relative bright spot in what seems to be a slowing global economy?
Yes, so I mean, the growth certainly looks really strong on the face of it, but they've also experienced a bit of a slowdown if we look at the year prior, where the economy grew by 6.1%. And if you look at full year expansion of 4.7%, that's down from 5.7% in 2023. From a sectoral perspective, they saw some really good growth coming through in agriculture, forestry and fishing, finance and insurance, transportation and property, but a bit of weakness in mining, quarrying and construction. And it's very similar to what we're seeing in South Africa as well, with tertiary sectors and services really driving growth. And the primary sectors, specifically when it comes to mining, really being a bit of a drag.
On the global stage, we're seeing central banks pulling in different directions, with tariff risks now weighing in on US Federal Reserve. How might these diverging monetary policies affect African markets and currencies in the coming months, do you think?
Yes, I think what's happened with the tariff impact is that it is unlikely to hit every country in the same way. So for that reason, you are seeing central banks reacting differently to one another. And when you have this kind of divergent policy framework, it becomes very difficult to predict the outlook for interest rates. And that in itself results in further uncertainty. So I think from an African markets perspective, this uncertainty won't be great. And we'll have to wait and see what the impacts are going to be on growth, on inflation, on employment, before our central banks can actually start making a move. And that delay, I think, could be quite costly.
All right. I guess to try and make sense of everything now, what would you say is the mood across African markets at this time and going forward?
So I think that there's still broadly a mood of uncertainty. There's a lot of moving parts currently. And even though things have calmed down a little bit from a global markets perspective, we still don't know what's going to happen after the 90-day stay of execution on tariffs from the US administration. And once we move through the tariff business, what is going to be the next policy move from the Trump administration that could upend the way we do business on this continent? So the mood is still quite uncertain. I wouldn't expect that to change anytime soon. Hopefully, the US administration runs out of gusto at some point and decide to calm down a little bit, and we can take stock. and then see if sentiment improves.
All right. So our listeners now, if they're thinking about where to invest, where should their money be? Obviously, one always advises to have a basket, but what looks the safest, or perhaps looks like might bring the best yields at the moment?
So I think at a time like this, it's important to be well diversified, as you mentioned, have a basket of different assets and in different geographies. So I think right now it's really important to start looking for those opportunities, because when things are a little bit chaotic, assets are mispriced, companies get too cheap or too expensive, and to really critically look at your portfolio and your investments, and then see if there are any opportunities to invest into weakness. I would suggest looking at kind of riskier assets right now, but to also even reconsider the US stock market at this point. We could still have a lot of volatility, but I think it's important to keep calm and look for opportunities when they come around.
Is there a country across Africa that you're looking at that you think might be a bright spark?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Kenya. I think that Kenya looks like is quite a bright spark at the moment. We're seeing decent momentum, growth momentum coming through as well. And then, I mean, I'm based in South Africa, and I also think that there's still a lot of opportunity in South Africa and in specific sectors in particular. I think that retail continues to move from strength to strength, and the operators that we have in this market are extremely impressive. So I think that for the time being, that's what I'm thinking. And then you could find opportunity in Nigeria while the oil price is weak and everyone else is fearful. So don't write them off just yet.
Chantal, always great talking to you. Thanks so much indeed. Have a lovely sunny day.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks so much. That's Chantal Marks, one of our regular market commentators, head of investment research at FNB Wealth and Investments, talking to us at the week that's been in terms of our markets. And
we enter our next hour just now.
Yeah,
in about a few seconds. That's the third and final hour of Africa Rise and Shine. And I think we had mentioned a little earlier, because yesterday we covered the story quite a lot about the new election of the new Pope.
What do you think
Catholic
of him?
Pope.
What do you know about him?
He's American, so I guess that continues. I don't know if that was intentional, but it continues the legacy of Pope Francis being the first as well. So another history being made. I don't know if that indicates a progression in terms of how they wanted to make that decision, the Cardinals.
Maybe next time we'll see a sub-Saharan African, who knows?
Interesting that Donald Trump's response was he wasn't expecting it. It was a surprise that the Pope would be from America.
I think a lot of people were surprised, actually. But anyway, we'll get into it, hopefully in this next hour. Right now, though, it's time for
the news. Here's Onele Nzinzi with your details, and then sports headlines with Musibudi Makuna. Good morning.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Burundi is set to hold legislative and district elections next month on the 4th of June. For the first time, these elections will be held separately from presidential elections slated for 2027. The Burundian constitution, which was revised in 2018, now includes a change in the length of the presidential term from 5 to 7 years. The campaign for legislative and district elections is expected to kick off today. A conservation charity has admitted that its rangers committed human rights abuses in the Democratic Republic of Congo. This follows an independent review into the Bantu community's allegations against the African Parks Rangers. The BBC's Mayeni Jones.
Despite commissioning an independent review into the actions of its rangers in the Republic of Congo, African Parks has not made the findings of the review public. Instead, it published a statement acknowledging that human rights abuses occurred in the Odzala-Kokua National Park, which it manages, but excluding details of the abuse. Last year, a report by the British newspaper The Mail on Sunday included testimony from members of the Baka community, who accused rangers working for African parks of beating, waterboarding and raping members of the community in order to stop them from accessing their ancestral forests.
Namibian President Themba Nandi-Ndaitwah is on her first ever foreign visit, travelling to Angola on a 2-day official visit. The visit is meant to strengthen bilateral and trade ties between the two countries. The visit marks the first official engagement between Nandi-Ndaitwah and Angolan President João Lourenço. African political analyst Faustinho Hendricks explains.
According to Angolan sources, this visit came by an invitation of President João Lourenço to the head state of Namibia. And I think that is a very, very important sign because Angola and Namibia share a historical relationship. In Namibia and in Angola are in power both political parties that came with the independence of each country. So they share good relations. They share historic ties, and we hope both countries can strengthen not just the political relationship, but especially engage the private sector.
The bodies of a journalist and his partner have been found in South Africa in an advanced stage of decomposition more than 2 months after they went missing. Police say they had found human remains, but DNA tests still needed to be conducted to confirm that they were those of radio journalist Busiso Ndlovu and his partner Zondwa Mdluli. In a joint statement, two media groups said the police had achieved a breakthrough after arresting 5 suspects. The media group said that the couple were murdered and their bodies dumped in a bush in northern Limpopo province. Lastly, this morning, the Pope will celebrate Mass at the Sistine Chapel. On Monday, he is also scheduled to meet members of the media. Pope Francis biographer Austin Ivory says this will be a crucial test for the new pontiff.
It's a moment, of course, for the Pope to thank the world's media. We've had 4,000, I believe, journalists accredited. Normally there are 500 here in the Vatican. It's a moment to tell those who are still in Rome at that time to thank them for their work. Also, just a moment we, the media, have a chance to sort of look at him and see him, as it were, up close. It'll be important for, again, the messages that he wants to give us.
For any news stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us at +27 11 714 4459. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, Amajita head coach Raymond Mdaka says their mandate against Zambia is to win tonight's game and top the group, while Carlos Alcaraz is back to his best for the Italian Open this after suffering numerous injuries. Details coming up at 8:30.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
Well, Catholics have a new pope, and that's what we'll be focusing on in the first half hour of this hour. As you've joined us, we say good morning to you and thank you for doing just that. We start here now, where the Catholic Conclave of Cardinals has elected Chicago-born Robert Francis Prevost as the first American pope. Prevost will be known as Pope Leo XIV. His historic election follows the death of Pope Francis on April 21st at the age of 88. Pope Leo is almost 20 years younger, at just 69, and has already received congratulations from U.S. President Donald Trump and leaders from around the world. Sherwin Bryce-Peace reports.
President Trump took to social media to congratulate the new pope, calling it an honor to realize that Leo would be the first American pope, referring further to the excitement around the development as a great honor for the United States. Trump said he looked forward to meeting the new pontiff, describing it as a meaningful moment. This was Pope Leo XIV's introduction to the crowds gathered in St. Peter's Square. Images beamed around the world. In a statement, UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres extended his heartfelt congratulations to Pope Leo, adding that he looked forward to building on the long legacy of cooperation between the United Nations and the Holy See. His deputy spokesperson, Farhan Haq, also shared some initial reaction.
As they say in Latin, habeas papam. We, of course, look forward to working with the new Pope, and certainly we hope that this is a day of celebration for the people of the Catholic Church. And of course, we once more pay our respects in the memory of the recently departed Pope Francis.
Congratulations also from Tanzania's President Samia Suluhu, who wished the new Pope all the best in his service to the Church and the world at large. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen wished that the new pontiff be guided by wisdom and strength. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky wished Pope Leo wisdom, inspiration and strength in carrying out his noble mission, while Kenya's President William Ruto also congratulated the 267th Pope, urging a papacy that would be a shining light of love, hope, and compassion. An American Pope, according to Fordham University theology professor Father Brian Massingdale, here speaking ahead of the conclave, was not anticipated.
Candidates from the United States, cardinals from the United States, enter with somewhat of a handicap. Because the United States is such a major global force in the world, I think many are reluctant to add the power of the papacy also to the United States' power in the world. And so I think it would be highly unlikely that there would be an American chosen to be Pope, but I wouldn't think it would be impossible.
Robert Francis Prevost was born in Chicago in 1955. He served in Peru in the 80s and 90s as a parish pastor, seminary teacher, and administrator. He was made a cardinal by Pope Francis in 2023. He served as prefect of the Dicastery of Bishops and president of the Pontifical Commission for Latin America since 2023, a role that elevated his profile within the Catholic hierarchy. Father Massingdale offering some thoughts on the direction of the Catholic Church in the wake of Pope Francis's death.
One thing we do know about the conclave is that 80% of the electors are cardinals that have been promoted by Francis. And so many people think that, well, does that mean that the next pope will continue his policies? I think it's fair to say that the cardinals as a group are in broad agreement with the general direction of that Francis established. But I do think that there might be a tendency to say, well, let's take a pause and let's look at where the church has come in those 12 years of Pope Francis, and then to see where do we want to go from here. And so I would say that we shouldn't look for like a radical departure from Francis.
While Americans in New York and Washington, D.C. also weighed in.
He's from America. He's the first American pontiff in history. Yes.
The new pope is from Chicago, and I'm very excited. I'm from the Chicago area, so that is really, really exciting, and it's a special, beautiful moment for sure.
Well, first of all, he's the first USA pope, and that's a great blessing for the United States of America, and I'm looking forward to him keeping our faith honest and glorious.
A little balanced out, I think, a little bit between the contemporary and traditional. So maybe a little bit more unified in a way.
It's incredible just to think about it. I mean, I think nobody really expected it to be an American, and so it's just really, really beautiful that this country, which hasn't been around for that long, historically speaking, has already brought about a pope in just such a short time. And so it's just so much joy.
Pope Leo's election to the papacy means that there have now been 2 consecutive pontiffs from the Americas. Pope Francis, who was Argentinian, was of course the first to be elected from Latin America. In his first words from the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica, Leo called for a missionary church that builds bridges and dialogue, urging people around the world to show charity to others and be in a dialogue of love. I'm Sherwin Bryce-Pease in New York.
Well, Chicago-born Robert Prevost becomes the first American pontiff in history. The 69-year-old Prevost has chosen the papal name Leo XIV. He was elected in the fourth round of voting in the conclave in the Sistine Chapel, which required 2/3 or 89 of the 133 cardinal electors to choose a successor to Pope Francis, who passed away last month. Let's talk to Anne Barrett-Doyle now, who is researcher and co-director of bishopaccountability.org on the views they hold and just looking into this story. Thank you so much for joining us, Anne. How are you?
I am fine. Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. Take us through your reaction in terms of how you feel about the election of the Pope as bishopaccountability.org.
We are stunned that an American was chosen. He was not at the top of any list. He was often mentioned as a possibility. We have concerns about Cardinal Prevost as Pope. His known record on the abuse crisis, with one exception, is troubling. He's been accused by victims in his former diocese in Peru of disregarding their allegations against two priests. And he has a history of resisting disclosure of abuse information. However, there is a case in Peru where victims said that he intervened on their behalf, and the result was the suppression of an abusive Catholic cult. So mixed record there, but we will start researching and find out more about him quickly in the coming days.
And what would your call to him be as an organization? As much as you say there are mixed reports there, should it be that on issues of sexual abuse, he doesn't take the stance that you wish he would? What would you want him to prioritize?
Well, the very first step that we hope Pope Leo takes is to universalize the U.S. norm of zero tolerance. Incredibly, the U.S. is the only they are the only bishops in the world who have under church law a rule that requires them to permanently remove any proven child molesters from ministry everywhere else in the world, including South Africa. Bishops can reinstate known child molesters if they meet certain conditions, in the bishop's opinion. This is shocking. This institution has no right to be reinstating child molesters under any circumstances. The advantage of having an American Pope is that he is deeply familiar with the zero tolerance rule that is particular to the U.S. Church, and therefore he might more readily apply it to the rest of the world. We hope he does, because instantly hundreds, if not thousands, of child molesters would be removed from Catholic ministry.
It's a similar historic election to his predecessor, Pope Francis, who was the first Latin American elected, as Pope Leo is the first American elected. Do you think that cardinals made this choice to indicate maybe a continuity of a progressive stance by the Church, since Pope Francis was seen as progressive?
It is really hard to say. Certainly, he was very favored by Pope Francis, clearly, because he was selected to run the dicastery for bishops in 2023. That made him one of the most powerful men in the Vatican. And the Pope at that point was quite old and ailing, and he had thoughts, I'm sure, about who would succeed him. So he certainly has Francis's imprint on him, and I suspect that Pope Leo will continue that kind of big tent philosophy that Pope Francis had, and the tendency towards liberalization of certain practices in the Catholic Church. But we are not experts in that area. Where we just really hope that Pope Leo makes ending the abuse crisis central to his papacy. We have concerns that he sees it as just another issue. He said in 2023, the whole church doesn't revolve around solving sexual abuse. That kind of offhand statement like, oh, there are many other things we have to worry about, we reject that because, in fact, without solving this crisis, the church cannot regain its moral authority and do as much good in the world as it should.
What, as you say, Americans generally are stunned by this election. Nobody seems to have imagined that it would be first American Pope to take the position. U.S. President Donald Trump also expressed his surprise as much as he congratulated the Pope. What might the Pope's stance be on the administration of Donald Trump? And should he be vocal on it as it pertains to issues of sexual abuse?
I really hope he does. I had real problems with the fact that Pope Francis refused to enact a universal zero tolerance rule for abusers in the church. But personally, I really endorsed the way he opposed President Trump on a number of issues. I do hope that Pope Leo continues this practice. The U.S. is making many enemies around the world right now, and for good reason. And I hope that as an American, he uses the power of the papacy to confront Donald Trump and the harm he's doing around the world.
Pope Leo XIV's views on women clerics has been previously reported as him saying that appointing women clerics won't solve problems within the Catholic Church, but it might create new ones. Your thoughts on that?
We really don't. We are an archive devoted completely to resolving and documenting the Catholic abuse crisis. So we don't weigh in on these other topics, although we acknowledge that they are also very important. But speaking of women and girls, they have been quite overlooked in the abuse crisis. There is one thing Pope Leo could do immediately is there is a very famous abuser of women, this worldwide renowned mosaic artist, a priest called Father Marco Rupnik. His case is well known in Rome and throughout the Catholic world. Pope Leo could immediately laicize him. His case has just been lingering for years in the Vatican, and that would send a signal that he cares about the abuse of women and girls as well as the abuse of boys and men.
Thanks again for your time, and we'll leave it there for this Friday. Enjoy your day.
Thank you.
That's Anne Barrett-Doyle, researcher and co-director of bishopaccountability.org.
Você é fluente em português? É apaixonado por rádio e quer trabalhar na África do Sul? Você tem documentos que o qualificam?
Make sure of it. For business, for culture, for Africa. Partner with Channel Africa, because Africa's voice is the future. Africa is a story. A living, breathing, ever-evolving masterpiece. And for over 5 decades now, one voice has told it like no other. Channel Africa. More than just a broadcaster, Channel Africa is the pulse of the continent. African-led, African-run, and deeply rooted.
As Provost, as Pope Leo XIV marks an historic moment for the Catholic Church. And this is the first time an American has been elected to the papacy. At 69 years old, Pope Leo brings a different generational energy, it's believed, to the role following the passing of Pope Francis last month. So, big question is, what might his leadership mean for the global Catholic community and for the church here in Africa? Well, let's find out. To help us unpack this historic development, we're now joined by Father Hugh O'Connor, who's the Secretary General of the South African Catholic Bishops' Conference. Father O'Connor, thanks so much indeed for joining us. Welcome to the program. It was an historic moment yesterday. How did it go for you? How are you feeling? Is this an exciting time for you as one that's dedicated your life to the Catholic movement?
Good morning, Peter. Good morning, listeners. Yes, it was an exciting moment. It was an unexpected moment. I was out to supper with two retired bishops. And during the supper, the announcement came, the white smoke came. And so we had something to celebrate, and then the wait, and then suddenly this huge surprise. Here was this man that nobody expected. There were lots of people who were saying, well, the church is going to go to the right or to the left, or they're going to try and find some compromise pope, and then we end up with Pope Leo XIV. So I think it's a real surprise, and really shows, that we don't have control over everything, even though we want to know and we want to manage. That there is a spirit of freedom. My initial thoughts and what I did initially was to have a look up a few things. Chicago is a really strong church. I see he went to St. Mary's School, so he would have had a pretty traditional Catholic upbringing, parish school. He, in his youth, joins the Augustinians and is sent out on mission to Peru. So I think that says something about the man's spirit. He wants to be of service. He is prepared to go where he is sent. In Peru, he is a parish priest. He's there for 20 years. He becomes a bishop. His leadership is noticed, and he is eventually elected to be the leader of the Augustinians worldwide. So the 20 years in Peru would have shaped him into a very, very different culture to that in which he grew up. It would have shaped him around the issues of the global south, over the developing of issues in developing nations. As the leader of the Augustinians worldwide, he would have then had a much wider experience of the international church. Augustinians are represented around the world. He would have had to deal with issues on an international level. Always remembering that no one country, no one group, no one nation represents the entire thinking of the church. He is then, after that, appointed to the dicastery for bishops, and so once again would have been exposed more specifically to those countries and those areas where he would have had responsibility for recommending bishops. He would have got the information through the papal nuncios, the documentation, and he would make those recommendations. So somebody who has a broad experience of the international church.
Right, so he's ready to take up the job for sure, it sounds like. Perhaps you can help us listeners understand the job of the Pope. I grew up Catholic, and we were always taught that he's essentially infallible, God's representative on the planet. How tough is this job?
Right. The Pope is both leader and guide and father to the universal church, but he is also a head of state. He is also a voice. He is a voice and has a moral voice. Now, having a moral voice does not necessarily mean that everything that he ever decides or does is absolutely perfect or throughout his life, he's been with no fault or no error. So he is both a spiritual guide, but also a moral voice to all people of goodwill. Look, the infallibility of the Pope is only exercised under certain conditions. He has the role of teacher, but the Church and the infallibility of the Holy Father, when he declares a particular teaching that must be believed by all Catholics, there are criteria for that. So I don't think that is his most important role. His most important role is to provide leadership, and I think to provide a voice and to provide unity and stability in a world that is becoming increasingly fractured, and where there are so many voices, often not for the good of humanity, that are clamoring to be heard and are sometimes drowning out voices of goodness, of justice, of mercy.
What do you think his work for Africa should be, given that this is where the church is growing the fastest?
Look, I think it is important to note the name. The last Pope Leo XIII, from the late 1890s into the early 1900s, looked around and saw the signs of the times. And one of the things that he noticed and saw was the condition of the working classes, that the Industrial Revolution, the developments of technology had not actually improved their lot in life. And he wrote a very important encyclical called Rerum Novarum on the dignity of work and the rights of workers. Pope Leo XIV, wanting to journey, choosing that name and wanting to journey within that tradition, very clearly places himself within the context of the social teachings of the Church, founded on human dignity, with a call to solidarity and commitment to the common good. So I think for the world, we're going to see a continued emphasis on justice, on peace, on mercy, on calls to world leaders to be of service and to work for the common good.
Yeah, I mean, he's seen as this bringing in a generational energy, as I described in the introduction. People talk about reform. In my mind, as someone, as I said, grew up Catholic, my issue's always been about modernizing the church to the modern day. There's a lot of tradition, a lot of practices that have carried on for centuries. Will there be a new type of Catholic Church going forward, do you think?
You know, I'm not quite sure what modernization actually means, because traditions are found in every culture and amongst every peoples. This was a very modern conclave. If you think of the amount of news coverage that was provided to the world, the having to deal with social media, having to deal with the potential of listening devices, potential of interference. I'm not quite sure what we mean by modernize. I don't foresee any radical change in teaching,
right?
If that's what we look for. But I think he will bring, as you said, a new energy, and it is a generational change. He's well aware of the challenges that the church has. And in fact, actually, if you really look at many of the church's teachings, there's been a real attempt from Pope Francis especially to say, well, how do we actually deal with these on the ground? How do we be pastoral? It is written that he does have a sympathy about communion for the divorced and remarried. And if he is in the tradition of social justice and the social teachings of the church, we will see that coming through.
Right.
The more...
Yeah, Father O'Connor, we've run out of time, unfortunately, but thank you so much indeed for giving us some interesting insights on our new Pope. Thanks for your time.
Thanks very much, Peter. Have a good morning.
And the same
Goodbye.
to you. Thank you. That was Father O'Connor, Secretary General of the Catholic Southern African Catholic Bishops. Fascinating, and we'll chat a little bit more about that with Asanda just now, because I love talking about this kind of thing. But first, here are news headlines with Onele Nsinsi.
SABC News headlines. The African perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Burundi is set to hold legislative and district elections next month on the 4th of June. The Burundian constitution, which was revised in 2018, now includes a change in the length of the presidential term from 5 to 7 years. The U.S. is reported to be working on taking the first group of white South Africans it has classified as refugees from as early as next week. President Donald Trump's administration is reported to be planning to send officials to the Washington Dulles International Airport in Virginia for an event to mark the arrival of the South Africans. And the Southern African Catholic Bishops' Conference says the appointment of Cardinal Robert Francis as the 267th Pope of the Catholic Church came as a surprise. Prevost was selected yesterday and has taken the name of Pope Leo XIV. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nsinsi.
SABC News headlines. The African perspective.
South Africa faces Zambia in the AFCON under-20s. Let's get the details from Musibuti Makura. She gives us the latest in the world of sports.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you so much, Asanda. It's a crucial game, that one between South Africa as well as Zambia, going for the top honours, of course, in Group A at the Africa Cup of Nations tournament out in Egypt tonight. So former SuperSport United juniors, as well as Zambia's under-20 international defender Melimo Lemunmango, says today's Crunch under-20 Africa Cup of Nations game against South Africa is special to him. The player grew up in South Africa playing for Matsatsantsa Apitori academy, and some of his former teammates are in this Amajita team. Now based in Germany, the 19-year-old centre-back is looking forward for this must-win encounter against his old teammates at the 30 June Stadium in Cairo, Egypt. Kickoff is at 8 p.m. Central African time.
It's definitely going to be interesting playing against a few old friends, and of course South Africa is a really good side. But I think we'll give 100% and we're definitely looking for a win. In South Africa, I grew up in Johannesburg. Yeah, Johannesburg. That's where I grew up. My family, based in South Africa. Yeah, I started playing football there. I played most of my football for SuperSport United.
Meanwhile, the last time a Zambian team reached the under-20 FIFA World Cup was back in 2021, producing good stars like Paxton Daka, Enoch Computer Mwebwe, as well as Fashion Sakala. This team didn't just qualify for the World Cup, but also won the AFCON under-20 on home soil. Now, Georgian-based attacker Boni Peneso is adamant that they can emulate this achievement.
The coach really had to put everything he could. We trained very well, we prepared despite having a long break, but the team was still in shape.
I think the last time you were at the World Cup, it was the team of Computer, Paxton Daka in 2017. Can you emulate them?
Yeah. No, they did good, they did their part. Now we have to also do our best.
On to this now, South African sprinter Bayanda Walaza says his experience at the Olympic Games as part of the 4x100 meter relay team has given him confidence ahead of the World Relay Championships in China this weekend. Originally slated as a reserve, Walaza seized his opportunity with injuries sidelining Sinesipo Dambele as well as Benjamin Richardson, ultimately helping his team secure a silver medal and making history as South Africa's youngest athlete to earn an Olympic Olympic medal. Balaza says he's now determined to play a key role in the team's success when they compete in China this weekend.
I think I've grown from it last year. And also, I'll also bring fighting spirit, and also bring trustness. I'll be trustworthy at this time. I won't hesitate. I won't be scared like I was last year, and I'm stronger than what I was last year. And I promise that I'll bring greatness to the team. I'll bring my everything. I bring my A game to this.
Balaza is also humbled by just how much the country now depends on him, second only to team captain Akani Simbeni, this after serving merely as a reserve just last year. His status has now shifted significantly and is now viewed as a key member of the squad.
Surely now it feels much more heavier than last time, because last time I didn't think about it a lot, but now because of I know what's going to happen there, it gives me that thing of preparing now before even getting there, and also it gives me motivation of where I am now from last year. Last year being not trusted, but now you are the first person they trust.
And finally, in tennis news, Carlos Alcaraz said he's back to his best for the Italian Open this after suffering injuries last month, while the Spaniard also welcomed back world number one Jannik Sinner, who's now poised for a comeback on home soil after serving a doping suspension. So Alcaraz withdrew from the Madrid Open just last month after struggling with hamstring as well as groin injuries he had sustained during the Barcelona Open final, opting to take a break as he could recover well before the French Open title defense. Alcaraz, who celebrated his 22nd birthday on Monday, received a bye into the second round in Rome, where he will play Serbia's Dusan Lajovic. Alcaraz is the third seed in Rome, and the Spaniard now to meet Sinner in the final, with both players on the opposite sides of this year's draw. The Italian has remained world number one despite serving a 3-month doping ban, as the 3 times Grand Slam champion now prepares for his first match since winning the Australian Open title in January in Australia of this year. It's 8:38 a.m. Central African Time. That's a wrap of your sports news this morning on Africa Rise and Shine. I do return with the On The Move team in the next hour for more sporting updates. As always, for any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibu D. Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
My name is Neto, N-E-T-O Chamani. Osiatiko, Nengezimo, Mkhanju, Phandle kunjani moyani. Voko Tendele. Africa at Play, Asteleli Siashaya. Africa's velvet voice is in the house. Africa at Play is a place to be, where we speak all things sport and music, from the African continent to the rest of the world. We speak to your bundles of joy in sport, 12-year-olds and below, teenagers in sport. And we speak to elite athletes, administrators, coaches, and all the behind-the-scenes stakeholders of sport and music. Africa at Play, Asteleli Siashaya. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.
It's time for your business news. Here's Chanduko Ligege.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter and Asanda. Good morning. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has announced major reforms to the country's visa system. These include the implementation of recommendations from the Work Visa Review, a new electronic travel authorization system, and a points-based system aimed at attracting skilled professionals and investors. Ramaphosa was speaking at the launch of the second phase of Operation Vulindlela, a joint initiative of the Presidency and National Treasury to accelerate the implementation of structural reforms and support economic recovery. Ramaphosa elaborates.
On the visa system, we will ensure that the recommendations of the Work Visa Review are fully implemented and introduce an electronic travel authorization system to support growth in tourism, but also to support growth in those who want to come and invest in our country.
Mali owes more than $94 million to the entity managing a dam which also provides power to Senegal and Mauritania. The funding gap raises the spectre of more electricity supply problems in Mali, where outages in recent years have dented public support for the military government that took power following coups in 2020 and 2021. The Manantali Dam and Power Plant came online in 2002 and has an installed capacity of 200 megawatts. More than half of what it produces goes to Mali, while Senegal gets 33% and Mauritania gets 15%. Still in West Africa, Nigeria has repaid $3.4 billion in emergency funding it received from the International Monetary Fund, IMF, to help the country cope with the impacts of the coronavirus pandemic 5 years ago. In April 2020, the IMF provided the financing to help Africa's largest oil exporter cope with a collapse in crude prices, which hit its finances and tipped the economy into recession. The most recent data from the Debt Management Office shows that Nigeria last year spent $4.66 billion to service its foreign debt, of which $1.63 billion was to the IMF. In North Africa, Morocco plans to spend $760 million on storage platforms across the country to stockpile necessities in immediate response to potential disasters. The stockpiles were ordered by King Mohammed VI in the wake of the devastating earthquake that hit the high Atlas Mountains in September 2023, killing more than 2,900 people and destroying homes and vital infrastructure. Morocco has faced recurrent flash floods, wildfires, cold snaps and droughts in recent years. U.S. President Donald Trump has announced that his administration has reached a trade deal with the UK. Speaking at the White House, he said the agreement would provide access to the British market for American beef, agricultural and industrial products. He said there won't be any red tape, and he congratulated the British Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer.
With this deal, the UK joins the United States in affirming that reciprocity and fairness is an essential and vital principle of international trade. The deal includes billions of dollars of increased market access for American exports, especially in agriculture, dramatically increasing access for American beef, ethanol, and virtually all of the products produced by our great farmers.
$1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 608, in Botswana 13 pula 46, Kenya the dollar is at 128 shilling 345, Zambia 26 kwacha 75, BRICS countries $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 real 70, Russia 81 rubles 83, India 85 rupee 35, China 71.23, South Africa $1 is at 18 rand 20, $1 is 75 pence to the British pound and 88 to the euro. Commodities: gold is at $3,313, platinum at $982 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil $63.20 a barrel. That is all for now. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chanduko Ligege.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
45 minutes past 8 Central African time. Let's go to Burundi now. The country is set to hold legislative and district elections next month. That's on the 5th of June. For the first time, these elections will be held separately from presidential elections slated for 2027. The Burundian constitution, which was revised in 2018, now includes a change in the length of the presidential term from 5 to 7 years. The campaign for legislative and district elections is expected to kick off today. And to tell us more, we're joined on the line by journalist in Burundi, Marius Muhirwe. Marius, always great catching up with you on these important stories in the region. How are you this Friday?
I'm okay. And how are you there?
I'm good. Thanks so much for making time. What makes these elections interesting is that for the first time they're being held separately from presidential elections. What do you think inspired this change?
Okay, thank you very much. Now, today, as I can tell you, Gitega, the political capital of Burundi, is, as you said, now hosting thousands of political party members for the launching of this this elections campaign for MPs, as you said, and the district and the village level elections scheduled next June. And this is included in the new revised constitution of 2018, as it was done in this constitution. Before it was 5 years term, but now it was extended in 7 years for the presidential elections. And now MPs have 5 years for the term. And this is a new change which was included in the last revised constitution.
The general and what seems to be acceptable term is 5 years, though. How are they justifying going from 5 to 7 years as a presidential term?
Yeah, according to the statements which were released last year, the President of the Republic said that, and even the President of the Constitutional Court said that it is not easy to do all the projects which are planned by the government during 5 years, and it was extended to 7 years.
As campaigns kick off today, what's at stake and what can we expect?
Yeah, today, as I said, it is a kickoff of this general campaign. Many Burundian, many foreigners said that this is the election which is led by the ruling party CNDD-FDD, which has no opposition, which has no strong opposition to be competing with these these elections, and then it is very easy to be won by the ruling party CNDD-FDD as there is no opposition. There is no strong opposition. Many parties have no strength to compete with this ruling party.
So what about the concerns then around that very same point you make? Burundi's Independent National Electoral Commission having disqualified several opposition candidates. Concerns around allegations of political manipulation. What are your thoughts on that in terms of the electoral process?
The National Independent Electoral Commission said that there is a peaceful cohabitation between all parties, but there are allegations of other parties, opposing parties, alleging that the National Independent Election is not easing other parties to compete, as the main leader, the main leader of the opposition, Agatogwasa, was excluded from this rally. He was, they were forming a coalition, but this party, CNL party, was excluded from this rally, and then the international observers. According to the National Independent Commission, the foreign observers are welcomed, but they can do it through the Ministry for Foreign Affairs, so that they can control all those observers who can come and observe how the elections are conducting.
Well, thanks so much, Marius. You do enjoy the weekend and all the best there.
Thank you very much. I will update you as any time is needed.
We'd appreciate it. Marius Muhirwe is a journalist in Burundi. 10 minutes before we get to the top of the hour now. Well, it's Friday, and our Channel Africa's Nhlanhla Mahlangu brings us what's happening in the world of arts on this day. So let's take a listen to what she's compiled for us today. This is African Artsy Beats.
In its heritage, it's the only international station that speaks to Africa in its own voices: English, Kiswahili, Chinyanja, French, and Portuguese. The languages that unite 1 billion people. We have been there through every shift, every milestone, and and every triumph. Not just reporting history, but shaping the conversations that define Africa's future. For brands, media planning, and advertisers, Channel Africa is more than just a platform. It's an opportunity. With 25 compelling shows covering current affairs, sports, business, music, and lifestyle, we deliver an engaging Pan-African audience ready to connect, invest, and act. Multi-award winning, internationally recognized, digitally accessible across the globe. When Africa speaks, the world listens, and Channel Africa makes sure of it. For business, for culture, for Africa, partner with Channel Africa because Africa's voice is the future. Africa is a story, a living, breathing, ever-evolving masterpiece. And for over 5 decades now, one voice has told it like no other. Channel Africa. More than just a broadcaster, Channel Africa is the pulse of the continent, African-led, African-run, and deeply rooted in its heritage. It's the only international station that speaks to Africa in its own voices: English, Kiswahili, Chinyanja, French, and Portuguese. The languages that unite 1 billion people. We have been there through every shift, every milestone, and every triumph. Not just reporting history, but shaping the conversations that define Africa's future. For brands, media planning, and advertisers, Channel Africa is more than just a platform. It's an opportunity. With 25 compelling shows covering current affairs, sports, business, music, and lifestyle, we deliver an engaging Pan-African audience ready to connect, invest, and act. Multi-award winning, internationally recognized, digitally accessible across the globe. When Africa speaks, the world listens, and Channel Africa makes sure of it. For business, for culture, for Africa, partner with Channel Africa because Africa's voice is the future. Africa is a story, a living, breathing, ever-evolving masterpiece. And for over 5 decades now, one voice has told it like no other. Channel Africa. More than just a broadcaster, Channel Africa is the pulse of the continent, African-led, African-run, and deeply rooted in its heritage. It's the only international station that speaks to Africa in its own voices: English, Kiswahili, Chinyanja, French, and Portuguese. The languages that unite 1 billion people. We have been there through every shift, every milestone, and every triumph. Not just reporting history, but shaping the conversations that define Africa's future. For brands, media planning, and advertisers, Channel Africa is more than just a platform. It's an opportunity. With 25 compelling shows covering current affairs, sports, business, music, and lifestyle, we deliver an engaging Pan-African audience ready to connect, invest, and act. Multi-award winning, internationally recognized, digitally accessible across the globe. When Africa speaks, the world listens, and Channel Africa makes sure of it. For business, for culture, for Africa, partner with Channel Africa because Africa's voice is the future. Africa is a story, a living, breathing, ever-evolving masterpiece. And for over 5 decades now, one voice has told it like no other. Channel Africa. More than just a broadcaster, Channel Africa is the pulse of the continent, African-led, African-run, and deeply rooted in its heritage. It's the only international station that speaks to Africa in its own voices: English, Kiswahili, Chinyanja, French, and Portuguese. The languages that unite 1 billion people. We have been there through every shift, every milestone, and every triumph. Not just reporting history, but shaping the conversations.
Coming up after the 9 o'clock news, it's the Friday edition of On the Move, and that's always so much fun, Palesa. What can we look forward to?
It is, but today it's both fun and informative. So we'll be speaking to one of the researchers who says Africa's misrepresentation on the world map is not just cartographic, but it's also a narrative issue. And that's the stance of these advocacy organizations, saying that called Africa No Filter and Speak Up Africa, and they're launching the Correct the Map campaign to put an end to what they say is an enduring falsehood of the representation of Africa on the map. And we'll be chatting to Amibola Ogundaro, advocacy and campaigns lead at Africa No Filter, in the first hour of the show. And then in today's second hour, from cities to rural communities, we're speaking about teenagers who are authors as well, which is great. Just yesterday we were speaking about raising teenagers, and we always think about teenagers as like rebellious, they're sort of misrepresented in a way as well. So these are teenagers who come together and they want to write. And so we find out a little bit more about that in the second hour. And then, of course, going into music in today's final hour of the show, speaking to Maseru, Lesotho-based hip-hop artist who goes by the name of Zulu Mufokeng.
Stacey Fru. You must look out for that name.
Yes, I've spoken to Stacey Fru.
Really? She must be a
fantastic.
Teenager now. She started writing at the age of 9.
Yes, I know
so
that. And we've spoken to her mom as well on the show, who's also walked the journey with Stacey Fru. She's incredible. Yes, Victorine.
She's such a supportive mom.
Very, very.
You start them from a young age, get them to read, and then get their interests explored further to writing. So I love it. I love it when kids are into books
Me too,
to that
it's
extent.
incredible.
How many guests are you having for that one?
Just 2. We're
Awesome.
having 2, yeah.
That's lovely.
I'm fascinated about this map thing because when I first found out about it, I was actually quite shocked. And to help people understand, so if you look at the world map right now, and you look at North America, you look at America, US, the United States, it looks a lot bigger than Africa.
And with a teeny tiny thing.
However, the numbers will tell you, the land area of the US is 9.8 million square kilometers. Africa is 30.2.
Yeah.
So that's on the
more
map,
than triple.
The map should look like this.
Yes.
Compared to America, but because it's a circle.
Yeah.
They've said we can't draw it so that it makes sense, but there's different ways of drawing it, and they drew it in a way that looks nice for them.
Yeah.
So that the US, Russia, and all these countries
look nice and big.
Look much bigger than they really are.
I wonder how long that process would take, though, for this advocacy group to have it changed.
It won't happen.
Will it even be in our lifetime?
It will never happen.
Maybe we just create our own atlases then in our schools.
Yeah.
It sounds crazy. We laugh about it.
Very true.
But anything is possible. If you want to rebel, just go for it.
I'm looking
in the
forward
positive
to that
sense.
Conversation. I really am.
Yeah. Looking forward to it. Thanks,
so
Palesa.
It's On the Move with Palesa and Benjamin coming up after the 9 o'clock news.
From us, though, on Rise and Shine, it's goodbye for now.
Yeah.
And happy Mother's Day
weekend.
to you first, Palesa.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Sunday, guys, don't forget, please. You see, now you already forgot. After this, go buy your gift, please.
It's my first Mum's Day without my mum. She passed away last year.
Same as me. We're on the same boat on that one.
So it'll be different. But we will remember her.
Yeah, we definitely will remember her. Yeah.
Okay, have an awesome day and a wonderful weekend, everybody. It's time for your news with Onel and Sitsi.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Find Africa's future. For brands, media planning, and advertisers, Channel Africa is more than just a platform. It's an opportunity. With 25 compelling shows covering current affairs, sports, business, music, and lifestyle, we deliver an engaging Pan-African audience ready to connect, invest, and act. Multi-award winning, internationally recognized, digitally accessible across the globe. When Africa speaks, the world listens, and Channel Africa makes sure of it. For business, for culture, for Africa. Partner with Channel Africa because Africa's voice.
Then the U.S. cuts $50 million in aid to Zambia's health sector. Your latest news. Greetings to our listeners. Burundi is set to hold legislative and district elections next month on the 5th of June. For the first time, these elections will be held separately from presidential elections slated for 2027. The Burundian constitution, which was revised in 2018, now includes a change in the length of the presidential term from 5 to 7 years. Their campaign for legislative and district elections is expected to kick off today. Namibian President Netumbo Nandi-Ndaitwah is on her first ever foreign visit, travelling to Angola for a 2-day official visit. The visit is set to strengthen bilateral and trade ties between the two countries. The visit marks the first official engagement between Nandi-Ndaitwah and Angolan President João Lourenço. African political analyst Faustinho Hendricks explains.
According to Angolan sources, this visit came by an invitation of President João Lourenço to the head state of Namibia. And I think that is a very, very important sign because Angola and Namibia share a historic relationship. In Namibia and in Angola are in power both political parties that came with the independence of each country. So they share good relations. They share historic ties, and we hope both countries can strengthen not just the political relationship, but especially engage the private sector.
A conservation charity has admitted that its rangers committed human rights abuses in the Democratic Republic of Congo. This follows an independent review into the Batwa community's allegations against the African Parks Rangers. The BBC's Mayeni Jones.
Despite commissioning an independent review into the actions of its rangers in the Republic of Congo, African Parks has not made the findings of the review public. Instead, it published a statement acknowledging that human rights abuses occurred in the Odzala-Kokua National Park, which it manages, but excluding details of the abuse. Last year, a report by the British newspaper The Mail on Sunday included testimony from members of the Baka community, who accused rangers working for African Parks of beating, waterboarding and raping members of the community in order to stop them from accessing their ancestral forests.
The U.S. is reported to be working on taking the first group of white South Africans that it has classified as refugees from as early as next week. President Donald Trump's administration is reported to be planning to send officials to the Washington Dulles International Airport in Virginia for an event to mark the arrival of the South Africans. In February, Trump issued an executive order that called for the U.S. to resettle Afrikaner refugees